Right. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Hello. Welcome to this pioneering conference. I think we have to agree with that. It's the first time there's ever been an interfaith discussion about, comparative diabology, the nature of evil, the nature of the devil, and looking at World War III. We hope not? Question mark. What's going on in the Middle East, Iran, Lebanon, Gaza, the whole story. And we're going to look at the Epstein files and many other things. Um, through the lens of comparative diabology. So, welcome to people. We're all from different time zones, and it's nice to see people here from around the world. I will. I just want to make a few opening remarks before we start, welcoming people on behalf of myself and the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy, and also Moeen, who's co-hosting this. He'll be saying a few remarks. Just to say that everyone is welcome. We operate a kind of free speech modality, but within reason and responsibility. So we're going to be polite. The main rule is we try and tell the truth as we see it, as proper academics, intellectuals. We're not going to be insulting anyone. However, I just want to say that the Institute and Global Vision, we're not responsible for what people say. It's not our duty to sort of police content. It's everybody speaker's duty to police themselves and to be courteous and diplomatic in their speech, and to be and to just try and work things out together to get to the truth. And I just want to start in an Islamic context. One invokes the divine wisdom to bless the meeting. I want to do the same. Invoke the divine intelligence, which is the name for, whatever you want to call the divine wisdom that brings us here together. May it shine upon us this day. In the Christian world, it's Easter Sunday, which is a day of resurrection and hope. Let that be true. Let our work help move forward towards a world of peace a little bit in this current world situation of tragedy. So thank you. Okay, that's my little. Moeen, do you want to say just a few words before I start my talk? Welcome. You'll need to unmute, sir. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the mute business is important. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, the most beneficent and merciful. Welcome everyone to this special joint event with Thomas's Institute, International Institute for Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. This would make our, if you classify it as eschatology, as our 12th conference. So we're pleased to host it, albeit in these, I don't know what the word is, horrible times. And the main thing is that we're not new to this discussion. So we have collected a galaxy of other scholars and commentators, and hopefully we will have a discussion that goes beyond the news headlines. Indeed, I would say we start where the mainstream stops. They don't go underneath the surface and look at, I'm not talking about geopolitics and current affairs, I'm talking about the spiritual and religious, fabric, ethos, beliefs, maybe, I remember a word in economics, driving force perhaps, the underlying driving force or drivers is not really being looked at, and if it is, very marginal. So hopefully, we will be, clarifying, articulating, discussing, refining, shining that perspective in a tolerant, interfaith manner. And this has been recorded, as far as I know. Hopefully it will be video edited and put onto YouTube. slight confusion about the 1 hour difference, confusion with London, so there will be other people joining us. But yes, it will be quite a journey today, over a dozen plus speakers, if they all turn up, well over a dozen and a half. So that's it from me, and we will stick to the agenda. You've got a very relaxed 1 hour, Thomas. I think it's good to articulate things rationally and peacefully. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you know if your chap Mohammad Balawi is coming?
I honestly don't know. I mean, some people at short notice, we'll see. But
Okay,
regardless, yeah.
I'll tailor my remarks so that if he does come, he can have his slot, because he's supposed to take the second half hour of this opening panel.
Yeah.
We'll see if he shows up.
But my view is take your time, as we agreed. You have your hour. There's plenty of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, okay. Thank you very much. So I've entitled my opening talk today to kind of introduce the theme of the conference: comparative diabology and world history, which is a big theme. And I want to introduce the concepts where this came from. So my work, is extensive over many years, but I was fascinated in history as a boy. I studied at Brighton College, Brighton Grammar School. My father wanted to take me to all the kind of ancient sites of Sussex and England, and I fell in love with history. I did an A-level in ancient history. I discovered the incredible, extent of human history, and I thought, God, this is amazing. And I studied philosophy at the University of Bristol. Then I went to Canada and studied extensively at the University of Calgary. I came back to London and studied a history degree. And I did all world history in the tradition of Toynbee, who taught at the University of London. I wanted to understand all of world history and every part of it, from ancient, classical, medieval, through to modern history. I ended up writing a paper on the esoteric roots of Marxism. I was interested in what Moeen calls the underside of history, the history that isn't taught. It wasn't so much Bismarck and diplomacy that excited me. It was thinking. It was philosophy. It was ideas. It was spirituality. I discovered the word dialectical materialism was coined by a Catholic guy called Joseph Dietzgen. Just a simple working class Catholic guy in Germany coined this phrase. And so that was the kind of thing that interested me. And then I studied for my PhD at the university, and I was looking at the history of the Cold War. Why was the communist bloc and the capitalist bloc poised to destroy each other? And that led me to very, very in-depth studies of intellectual history for my PhD. And I went to Moscow in 1990 and was elected coordinator of philosophers and historians of peace. And I met intellectuals from all over the place, all over the planet, in fact, and did the PhD. It was finalized, finished, examined in 2008. But of course, you can't say everything in one PhD. That's the problem, isn't it? Even that, 100,000 words, you can't say everything. So I did a lot of extra work. And I was invited in 2014 to give a lecture at the University of Oxford and London. It was a two-part thing on the nature of, is the devil behind events in modern history? It was an Iranian friend invited me to give this lecture in Oxford. And I did a lot of research. Obviously, I'd done a lot of research on the intellectual origins of Marxism. Was he a Satanist? Kind of stuff. And that's where I coined the phrase comparative diabology. I said in this lecture that we need to study this notion of the devil in great detail. Instead of saying, oh, all Marxists are devil worshippers, or all Christians are devil worshippers, or all Muslims are, why don't we have an academic approach, comparative diabology, look at this from all perspectives? Let's actually have an intelligent discussion about this idea instead of demonizing each other. And by then, I'd been teaching at the Muslim college. I had many Muslim friends and students and teachers. I was a friend of Dr. Zaki Badawi, who got me lecturing there. And I knew that Muslims are not devil worshippers. They're incredibly intelligent, kind, generous, polite people who were some of my most amazing students. And I'd studied the history of Islam and the history of all the other religions, Christianity and Judaism. So what's not to like about the idea of a comparative diabology? Um, my vision was if we all just come together and share, then enlightenment will dawn and we can stop the wars. That's still my view. In 2019, having moved to France, I was invited to give a lecture at a conference on esotericism in European history at the University of Brno in Czechia. And here I gave a talk called Comparative Diabology in Western Esotericism. I put all this together in a synthesis, and then it became a book. So this is the book. If you haven't read this, this is the book of Comparative Diabology. And what I did in this book, which I'll be drawing on, is I looked at attitudes to the devil in all known religions and philosophical traditions, using my periodic table of the world's religious and philosophical traditions, which I'd written as a teacher for use in schoolrooms, as I taught, you know, I was also working as a full-time teacher in the British school system. I designed this periodic table to give people an insight into how profound and interesting our religious story is as a planet. The blue ones are the Christians, the green ones are the Muslims, the Hindus are the yellow, the humanist ones are these brown ones, Shinto, Jain, Buddhist, Chinese religions, Taoism, and Judaism down the side here. And this is a visual way, like Mendeleev's table of the elements, of showing how they all fit together and where they all come from. And what I did with the Comparative Diabology book is I looked at it in detail. I then honed in on what's the attitude to the devil in each of these traditions. It was a lot of work, but, I love scholarship, so I enjoyed doing it. And it was, I think, a major contribution. It's the first time anyone's ever tried this, to be honest. During the PhD thesis itself, I looked at the nature of the study of peace from 1945 to 2001, saying, what have the greatest thinkers on the planet been doing about finding peace? Because here we are spending billions on the Cold War and on, weapons that can destroy the planet. Who's been trying to stop this? Who's been trying to think out, get us out of this mess? And I looked, there was a chapter on the history of philosophers looking at this problem, historians. There was a chapter on psychologists, because obviously how psychology makes sense of reality is going to determine whether we're peaceable or violent or aggressive or whatever. I looked at the history of the tragedies of war, the Holocaust, the genocides that have been going on, the pattern of humiliation that people do. I looked at Freud's theories, the dark side of human nature. Are we repressing something in all these killings? There's a lot of projection going on, it seems to me, in conflict and war. So there was an important chapter on psychohistory, the psychological dynamics underlying violence and warfare. And then I looked at it from the Jungian side. Where's the shadow side of history? Are we, do we project onto the other our own worst fears and failings? I also looked at things like this extreme violence people have, and we're seeing this in our time. There is a thing called amok syndrome. It's a psychiatric syndrome when people literally run amok. This was a phrase from the Malay culture. And very often the Malay people are incredibly kind, loving, polite, gentle people. But every now and then one of them picks up a sword and goes and slaughters people. And this is called running amok, which is a British phrase. But it's now a psychiatric syndrome. Sometimes people do this. And it seems to me, we have that problem in the Gaza genocide, in the way Trump is behaving, bombing Iran, etc. This is a mock syndrome. It's a psychiatric problem. The Malay syndrome, amok syndrome, they would explain as he's possessed by a devil. That's what's happened here. And it's not only there, the berserker culture of the Norse people, they have a similar syndrome. So is there a kind of diabolic possession that happens to people that makes us extremely violent sometimes? Mental illness is related to this. Hospitals are full of people who experience possession by the diabolic. Um, what's going on there? How can we cure collectively and individually this problem? The common theme seems to be fear. People are terrified of the devil, terrified of possession, terrified of losing their mind. Well, how can we cure that? I would say love is the cure here, as a, psychologist, but then love and courage, being prepared to face that dark and come through to the light. That's what this day, Easter Sunday, represents. Now, there's another way of talking about this, and we can talk about political eschatologies. Um, and there's a philosophy of history that was very common in the 19th century. This socialist dream that we can get rid of the devils of history by improving society. We can you know solve the world's problems if we come together as a society, and we can have a secular eschatology, therefore, based on science, where the collective social and economic repression of the proletariat and the working classes can be redeemed. I've been listening to Engels' amazing book looking at the conditions of the working class in England in the 1830s and 40s. And he says this is diabolic, what's happening. People were cramped into tiny rooms, they had no furniture, hardly any clothes, and they were slaving away in factories. He was shocked. He described what he saw as literally diabolic. Most of them were Irish, working class people who'd escaped the famine, come to Manchester, and were now living in hovels. And he says, what's happening here is diabolic. What inspired Marx and Engels to think up an alternative was the horror of this diabolic thing they called capitalism. Other socialist thinkers like Pierre Leroux in France, Saint-Simon, Robert Owen, Bernard Shaw, William Morris, they were all infused by this collective dream of escaping that diabolic hell that capitalism had created. But what happened? The idea was to transform history onto the path of goodness, but it ended up in the violence of Stalinism and Mao and the collective repression of people in the Gulag. So how did that happen? I looked at this in the thesis. How did that beautiful dream of freedom from evil turn into its own hell, which has been written about by many historians? It seems to me, do human beings need to keep hold of some kind of religious iconography? Do we need some kind of faith that we can work with? A sense of justice and law beyond the mere temporal. And that's what Franco said. I've been studying Franco's expose of the horrors of Stalinism. And he said, yes, this is the devil's work. Communism has become the work of the devil. He was a strong Roman Catholic who believed literally in the devil. And he wrote articles blaming it all on Freemasons and the corruptions of that human-centered enlightenment, that we can do it all without God. He said no. And that's why he launched his war on the Republic and on the communists of Spain. Now, it's weird, isn't it, that communism created its counter-image in fascism and Nazism, and they both hated each other and projected onto each other the devil. So when I was studying my PhD, I discovered this incredible hate speeches coming out of the right wing against the left wing and vice versa. Are they projecting onto each other their mutual hatred? It gave us World War II and the Spanish Civil War. These political secular eschatologies and religious eschatologies all combined in a dangerous mixture. And so this is part of what we have to study. We have to unpick all this stuff. Fortunately, Spain's moved on now, and it's not run by Opus Dei, which still has that kind of idea. But those ideas are very deep, and we see them recurring in people like Hegseth and the Trump MAGA right wing. They're repeating a lot of what Franco was saying, their hatred of liberalism and progress and Europe. could be taken from Franco's speeches, in fact. So how can we solve all these hyper-polarized problems? That's the purpose why we're coming together today. And so just to say that in 1991, I set up this Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy to move our intellectual community, firstly in London and the UK, but broadly, in the direction of peace and peace studies. I met the leading intellectuals involved in that, people like Galtung and John Burton and many others, and organised about 30 meetings in the UK Parliament to try and get discussion among peers and lords. I then founded the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East. I went to Israel and Palestine in 2009. I felt, look, here's a troubled region. They keep breaking out into war. Their conflict is obviously partly religious, partly political, partly economic. Why can't we just work with them to get a two-state solution? I felt Britain has a moral responsibility to help here, given that we had the mandate and we helped cause all these problems. And so I dreamed up this idea of why don't we reopen the Golden Gate? I walked around the old walls of the city of Jerusalem, discovered there's a locked gate in the east. And in there will come the Messiah, and it's shut since the Ottoman Sultan shut it in about 1600. I said, well, why can't we open that and collectively, celebrate the advent of an era of peace? All the religions, all the faiths could come in together, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, etc., and celebrate. The Dome of the Rock could be a place of peace. I visioned a peace tent there for advanced intellectual discussions. And in fact, all the Muslims I met in Palestine, all the Jewish intellectuals, the Christians, they all said, what a brilliant idea, Thomas, let's do it. But look what's happened. It's like, I'll come to this in a minute, but it's like Netanyahu's team have been watching my ideas and turning them into their opposite. They've been trolling me with diabolic inversion. So then we have to look. So I decided, well, hey, we have to look at religious eschatologies here. This isn't just a political problem. There are deep conflicts going on in people's souls. Every tradition, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Baha'i, Buddhist, Hindu, Zoroastrian, and so on, as I knew from my studies from the periodic table and my teaching career, they all have a different view of the eschatology of the future. They also have a different view of the nature of the soul, what happens after death, what happens before birth, what is the soul. They have a different view of the devil and the nature of evil. They all have something about that. And so let's have an interfaith study program, is what I thought, and look at this diabolic feature of human nature and try and comprehend it rationally. Is it possible to get a kind of intellectual ceasefire that will help end all these killings and bombings? I mean, I think statesmen shouldn't be allowed to be in positions of great power unless they've done a basic course in interfaith studies. Someone like Hegseth literally has not a clue about the profundity of Islamic thought. He thinks, they're all diabolic, let's just bomb them. A sort of throwback to the crusading mentality. So I studied in depth the sacred scriptures of mankind. I did a commentary on the entire Quran, which took me 10 years, having, worked on this text since my 20s. And I did a very detailed line-by-line commentary on the Quran. And the Gospels. So I did all the 4 main Gospels, plus the 2 Gnostic Gospels, and the Ketuvim, the Proverbs and the other writings. And I looked at these texts objectively as a scholar, trying to understand the texts that seem to want us to be warlike and fighting versus those that are more peace-loving and want us to understand and communicate with each other, and did a very detailed study of all that. That leads me to my next point, which is the idea of psycho-eschatology is what came to me at this point. So we need to understand eschatology through the lens of psychology. How do our religious ideologies create a system of thought that we project into the future? And I think if we apply the insights of psychologists like Freud and Jung, Ken Wilber and many others, transpersonal psychologists, we come up with a transpersonal history. That is what was the finding of my PhD. And then we can apply that to psychoeschatology. We can begin to understand rationally what's going on here. Um, and then we can begin to try and get communication between them. And we can take this further back into the 19th century, look at the work of Goethe, say, or Rudolf Steiner, or Fichte, or Hegel, or Kant, and we can say, what was their psychoeschatology? What did they think is going to happen in the future of the world? Did they believe we're all going to kill each other? No, obviously not. They had a more positive, optimistic view of human evolution. Well, how can we make that come true? Um, most of these faith traditions have some kind of idea of an end time. But isn't it possible, if we look at the scripts of these great thinkers, can't we find a way to look at that end time script in a positive way and get a kind of peace agreement where everybody wins? And we don't all have to destroy each other just to prove that God loves us. That's the kind of shift that I think we need from a psycho-eschatological perspective. Um, and okay, I want to come now to my next sequence, and then I'm going to finish. I'm also a poet. You may catch glimpses of that in my discourse. I'm a great lover of language, literature, poetry. I've written several novels and over 1,000 poems. And to me, I want to just say there's a whole question, namely about the poetics of the devil. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to argue that poetry understands that the devil is a poetic conceit. It's an image used in literature and poetry to explain suffering and evil. But not, I submit, it was ever intended to be taken literally, just as poetry isn't literal. It takes us to a new way of perceiving where we can understand reality. So Victor Hugo, whose work I greatly admire, I have his collected poems in my library in the village here in France. He wrote an unfinished poem about the devil, which is in French, and I'm planning to finish it if I have time, about how the devil is defeated through education, through learning, through democracy, through wisdom. It's a masterpiece. Shelley wrote Prometheus Unbound, again about the Greek version of the devil, Prometheus, who's actually a helper of mankind, brings us fire and knowledge. Blake wrote about the reconciliation of heaven and hell. Voltaire wrote a play about a druid in hell being rescued by Orpheus. It's a little-known masterpiece. And Aleister Crowley wrote A Hymn to Pan. Carducci, a great Italian poet that won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote A Hymn to Satan. So these are all poets working with this idea of the devil, but trying to make it come right. And I think, I recommend this idea to us all. This was the great insight of Romanticism, that we can grow out of our diabolic literalism. We need to be free of literal diabologies and instead understand how these poetic conceits have then been misapplied and manipulated by extremist forces, such as political Zionism, such as Christian Zionism, certain types of Islamic extremism, by Russianism and Putin's war on Satanism, as he called it, when he attacked Ukraine, ISIS and all these groups. So the poets of the world, have to reclaim this idea of the devil. No, this is our creation. In the Hebrew scriptures, Isaiah, this is a poetic creation. We need to reclaim it and not let these crazy people steal it and misapply it. These people are all fighting for narrative dominance nowadays. They're using psyops and misusing the internet, suppressing alternative narratives, silencing thinkers with divergent views. Well, poets don't behave like that. Intellectuals shouldn't behave like that. These people are the crazy ones. What they're doing is replacing complexity with oversimplistic Manichaean views of polarization. And our duty as thinkers is to return to our upholding the beauty of complexity, the beauty of parallel and simultaneous narratives. As in a complex Shakespeare play, when the tragedy turns into a comedy, once ego releases its grip and the authentic self of humanity can step forward and redeem us all from the diabolic stories, which we're also tightly bound up with. And instead, let's create a new poetics, a new collective narrative based on love, and tell each other a new story, one that leads to actual lasting peace, justice, and truth. So that's my opening remarks about this event and why we're all here, I hope. And I think now's a good time to welcome a few of our new guests that have just appeared. Ian, welcome from Australia, I believe.
Yes, thank you.
Well done for joining us. Yeah. And you're in Melbourne, I believe. That's excellent.
That's correct, yes.
Good
And
to
I
see
didn't
you.
realize that you had switched everything on. And I was sitting here waiting to be switched on. And I've only heard a half of your beautifying poetry address. So I'm
Well, you'll be
looking
able
forward
to
to
hear the rest later, and I'll send you the text. But Ian is an old warrior of peace in Melbourne. He's been working on this, particularly in the Middle East, for a long time. So welcome. So any
it.
comments or questions? Mohammed, are you joining us from, where are you joining us from? Um, uh, do identify yourself if you're, just arrived. So any questions or responses? We've got half an hour nearly for discussion. I tried to limit my remarks to 30 minutes, but anyone want to go into bat first? What are your views on this? George, you've been around this issue, haven't you, for a long time as a Catholic scholar and philosopher. Um, what do you think of my proposal? You'll have to unmute.
Sorry, my internet is not that good. And yes, my name is Mohammad. I'm attending, I'm in France actually, but I live in Nancy.
Okay, welcome.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks so
good.
much.
Right.
Thomas, good morning. Thank you for the introduction and how to I put how can we beautify complexity as by your initiative. My name is Inge Mette and I'm based in Norway, looking at the clouds and waiting for a heavy storm. And they say, but last evening I took my time to look at Da Vinci's Angels and Demons.
Okay,
And
classic work.
yeah, it's a classical work. And then the evil aspect that it presented in symbolism from the Vatican to the CT, the conspiration theories, and how the power of uh, uh, of theories and the social media amplifying also the opposite of beauty of complexity. And there is also, I saw another young, like the Gen Z power of the manhood called men, like a men community that is also slightly into the opposite of what we're trying to cultivate, the beauty of complexity. So my heart is just opening to say that what can we really do, and how can we support your initiative? That's my introduction of for you and how to support you and how to create the momentum behind you and with you. So it's the media, the Netflix and the social media, and the conspiracy theories, the CT, as they call it. They are so everywhere in the society now, and it's exact opposite of the beauty of complexity.
Yes.
Back to you again.
No, that's a very great contribution. Yes, the oversimplification of the narratives is what I think is behind this hyperpolarization, and it's this over literalization of diabolism. You know, the other guys with the other narrative, they're the devil, so we're going to destroy them. Instead of, hey, we're all human beings having a life experience. Let's share, understand each other's wisdom. We're artists here. I think that, you know, the human journey, we're all artists co-creating a reality that is fit to live in. And we have a duty as artists to make it come out right, to produce something of beauty. That's why I'm with the romantics. I believe that ultimately the purpose of life is beauty. And when I see Hegseth foaming at the mouth saying we're going to bomb Iran into the Stone Age, I don't see beauty. I see moral ugliness. When I see Netanyahu bombing Gaza, I see moral ugliness. And that is, you know, a diabolic thing in itself. I always listen to the UN speeches by world leaders carefully. In September they will come to the podium. I've been doing this for years, and I was always impressed by the Iranians. Imam Khamenei, their leader, gave such eloquent, intellectually profound speeches at the podium. As a Shia Muslim thinker, he understood the beauty, the divine beauty I'm talking about. And he realizes, having studied his sacred text, that our duty as humans is to praise that beauty, because it comes from the divine intelligence. We don't create it. We're a little bit of it. But our duty is to praise the source, which is, you know, the divine intelligence itself. Now, how is it possible a man of such stature and wisdom can be bombed with his family and relatives and his friends callously by Israel and America, as if they're doing something right? And then they tell the world's media, we've done it, we've taken them out. To me, that is an act of extreme moral ugliness that, you know, which we need to call out and readjust our ways of thinking, because it's an insult to our intelligence, each one of us, it seems to me. And thank you for those comments. Anyone else? Ian, do you want to comment? Because although you didn't hear my talk, you heard the last bits of it. And you know, as a peace scholar, you've been working for years to try and get peace in the Middle East. You must be really upset at what's happening now.
I absolutely feel disgraced for all of us when the American politicians can stand there and say, we're going to bring Christianity to its peak of existence by bombing the Muslims out of existence in one of the world's great societies. It's absolutely disgraceful. They haven't got a brain in their heads to be postulating such a thinking. And I hope that as the evening goes on, we will find ways of moving towards the re-establishment of our hunt for a global multi-faith organization of research and education.
Yeah, and that's something you've been working on with the World Intellectual Wisdom Forum, which we've been working on together since 2017. So that is important. Thank you for that contribution. And also, can I say that it is also a theological struggle that we're doing here, because when people like Hegseth can get up and spout their hate speeches, you know, they've been brainwashed by this notion of Christian Zionism. That's what they call it, which the MAGA movement has taken to its heart. But recently we've had a Roman Catholic cardinal speaking out, calling out Christian Zionism as a literal heresy. It's a kind of cult that's taken over the Republican Party, taken over Trump, and taken over people like Hegseth. I think we have to just name it for what it is. It's a dangerous cult. And it seems to believe, insofar as it has any thinking at all, it seems to believe, as the cardinal pointed out, that by causing mayhem and chaos in the Middle East, by killing millions of people, you know, causing absolute mayhem, it's somehow going to make Christ come back and I don't know, judge the world in some way, as if that's what Christ wants, to come in like a sort of an avenging angel at the end of history. And what's he going to do? Walk around all the burned out bodies in Gaza and Iran, and he's going to pronounce, "Oh well, we won." I mean, it's such a puerile, ill thought out, illogical, and heretical way of thinking, and yet it's taken over the USA. So there's got to be theological resistance. One thing we're doing here by reframing that whole conversation is actually a work of theological resistance to all this stuff. And that's a profound work, and we have to do that together. That's not just for Christians. It's for Christians and Muslims and Jews working together to frame a new way of thinking about our relationship as humans to the divine intelligence. What are we supposed to be doing here on this planet? I don't believe it's blowing each other up and threatening each other with weapons of mass destruction. So any other comments? Any other? Hanan Aruri, you've joined us. Would you like to comment from your perspective? I don't know where you're joining us from.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so sorry because I am following you while I'm driving, but I just fully agree with every single word has been said. This war is not about a war between two power struggle. It's an evil war led by people who have just theological weird thoughts, trying to force other nations to submit to their way of thinking, to their ideology, which has absolutely no even theological basis.
Thank you.
In the region, we have been the target of this evil. We are experimental laboratory for there to practice such behavior, to experiment their destructive tools. These tools will not stop to be used against us only. These will be also being used as a way to control the rest of the world. Anybody who doesn't agree or doesn't go along with their way of how they see the world will be subjected to the same end, will be subjected to the same judgment. So it's not only about using the war between the West and the East, between the Islam or Christianity or Judaism. This war is between those who want to rule the world, the rich elite who became completely disconnected from the world, from the life, the real life, and they have their own perception of the existence of the human being. For me, when I see how they are employing the AI in the destruction, and how these machines have been used to eliminate human beings, I start to pose question on the future of humanity as all. How do they see us? Are they have plans to replace humans? Do they have plans to replace those who are not fully conforming to their way, or to their ideas, to their guidelines, how they want to see the human race? I'm just asking the bigger question. Sure. About the real existence of the human race, the culture, the society, how they perceive the art, even how do we perceive the beauty, how do we perceive faith, how do we perceive our relationships to each others?
Those are all very important questions. Yeah.
For example, I just want I'm right now in France. Here, okay. I came to South France. People are completely disconnected from reality. I am shocked. They don't even know there's war in Iran. They don't even know there is daily massacres committed in their names against other nations who pose absolutely no threat to them whatsoever. What they are busy talking about, these immigrants coming to take our jobs, these immigrants are the cause of the problem. And I said to them, you know how they replace the enemy? You understand how they took you from looking at how they are destroying your society with their with your future even existence, and put the blame on a few people who come. And immigration has been always
Yeah,
existing
escaping
throughout
from
history.
wars that the system has itself created. I mean, the system, military capitalism is incredibly intelligent. It creates wars, creates mass immigration, then it can use that to blame and demonize. So thank you very much, Hanan, for your contribution. And
No, thank you for
yeah,
inviting me.
important. Just to pick up on a couple of points there, I think, we have a big job, as you say, and I'm sorry that your people have suffered the full force of this madness. I just want to say about the role of AI and this dehumanization that's going on. It's interesting that the people behind the MAGA coup in America, people like Elon Musk, they all worship a kind of transhumanist ideology
Yes.
where they want to replace human beings with artificial intelligence, and that word itself is interesting. I'm a believer in human intelligence and divine intelligence. We don't need artificial intelligence. We have it in ourselves, human intelligence, and it should be a receptacle of divine intelligence. That's the kind of mode I would like us to go in. What's interesting is Rudolf Steiner, a very great Christian theologian, predicted this. He said that the devil, Ahriman, is going to appear in our century as a robotic kind of intelligence to be replacing human wisdom, beauty, love, the capacity for feeling and morality with a kind of roboticized intelligence that will sweep over and control. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. And we have to resist that with our innate knowledge. And this is where education is so important. You see, there is another narrative. I'm not going to let these MAGA crazy loons get away with hijacking the whole of Western civilization and reframing what we're doing as they're going back to a sort of crusading mentality where they define Christianity as a crusading war against the Muslims. This is such a blasphemy because in my studies of the Quran and early Christianity, I know that Mohammad was deeply inspired by Christ. He regarded him as the Messiah. Him and Khadija, they had a little house church going on in Mecca with Waraka, Khadija's cousin, and they saw themselves as continuing and fulfilling Jesus's mission. They took a more Gnostic theological interpretation, but it was basically an offshoot of the Christian work. So any Christian that says our mission is to destroy Islam, no, our mission should be to understand and comprehend and work with and appreciate Islam, which after all means surrender, submission to the absolute. What's wrong with that? We should all be doing that. So, I'm speaking on behalf of that alternative narrative. Going back to those crusading times, there was a French intellectual called Peter Abelard, who was so excited by rediscovering Aristotle, he compared it with the Bible. He created a logic for understanding truth. But somebody's doing a lot of feedback. Sorry. I think it's our dear friend Sean. I'm going to shut down Dublin whilst you sort out the feedback problem. Welcome, Sean. Yes, so Abelard said, look, he learned that the Muslims had studied Aristotle and worked how it works out with the Quran. You can understand the divine knowledge that Aristotle said is the source of being, how it manifests in different revelatory systems, be it Islam or Christianity. And he looked at the Bible through the lens of Aristotle. And he said, well, we need to look at this biblical text logically. And basically that instinct is what gave birth to the University of Paris. It gave rebirth to higher education in Europe, which had been dormant for 1,000 years. And and he was, interesting enough, in touch with Muslim and Jewish thinkers in Spain. We know he was in correspondence with them, saying, wow, what you're doing is amazing in Cordoba. So I'm coming from that Abelardian tradition of using intellect for conviviality between the religions, not declaring crusading wars. I mean, this man Hegseth went to Yale and he should know better than what he's spouting. So I think our job is an educational one, at these people. And if I was in DC, I'd be organizing meetings in Congress and having philosophical conversations with them, and just proving they're lacking in their basic knowledge. And also, I'd go one step further. I'd strip their degrees off them. I think Hegseth and people shouldn't have degrees. Same with Trump. The universities they have the power to recall a degree, and these guys are letting the show down by what they're doing, and it should be stripped off immediately. Okay, any other comments? We've got 10 minutes, and then we're going to move to our second session. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, can you hear me, Thomas?
Hello, Moeen. Yes, please.
Yeah, good. That's good you're having some sort of Q&A. Because some people missed your opening remarks, can you clarify those two texts that you referred at the beginning? I think that's important. And secondly, good morning, Simon and others. Simon is I'm going to give him what's the word? The blessing or the privilege to speak before me for certain reasons. So anyway, if you can clarify those two texts that I saw you mentioning, I think they're very important.
Okay. Yeah, so for those that didn't manage to get here on time, you'll be able to watch it. But I talked about this book, which is the kind of core text, Comparative Diabology, and I basically looked at images of the devil in all different philosophical and religious systems, and it's a very, very detailed study. And I wrote it for a conference initially in Czechia at the University of Brno. And then I based it on the periodic table of the world's religious and philosophical traditions, which has a book.
Sorry for interrupting, Thomas. I'm going to butt in. What do you call that table? Just to clarify.
This is called the periodic table of the world's religious and philosophical traditions.
Okay.
And it's got a book that comes with it. It's based on Mendeleev's periodic table of the elements.
So when were these published? When was the chart published, and when was the Diabology published?
Yeah, so this chart was published in the year 2009.
Okay.
And you can order it for a university or school. There's a big size that comes. You can order it from Canada. And I want it to be in every classroom that teaches philosophy and religious studies and theology. If this had been on the wall when Hegseth was studying, he would have seen all these green boxes of Islam. He'd look at all the complexities, the Sunni, the Shia, the Sufi, the Ismaili, and he wouldn't be allowed to be so simplistic in his diabolic rhetoric. Okay. And the same with all the different branches of Christianity. If Franco had this on his wall, he wouldn't have become such a fanatical, let's kill all the Protestants kind of guy.
Okay.
So that's very important, the book that comes with that. And then the text that came to the University of Brno, that was in 2009.
Is that your work, by the way? Are you the editor of that?
Yeah, I wrote the things, yes.
Right, fantastic. Yeah.
So, and then, of course, I also mentioned my commentary on the Quran, which is available as a talking book. You can listen to that. And my commentary on the Gospels, all 6 Gospels, including Thomas and Mary Magdalene. That's a talking book on the website of the Global Green University. And at the moment, I'm turning them into printed books. I've got, a backlog of writing, which is going on, but they will be done in the next few years. I want to get them translated, possibly into Turkish. I'd like to get the Quran in Turkish and in Arabic as well, because it's a really, I'm not boasting when I say it's the most important commentary on the Quran in English that's ever been attempted, because what I'm doing is I'm including all the latest historical, archaeological, philological, discoveries, and looking at the Quran through that lens. And also it's a chronological version of the Quran. The Quran is on the shelf.
Fantastic. Hopefully some of the Turkish contacts here.
Yeah.
We have, the Turks are very organized.
Translated.
you have the Diyanet, the National Ministry of Religion, I think they call it.
Well, I'd love to work with them on getting it translated into Turkish, because it is a hugely important work that reframes the way we think about Islam. Instead of being an enemy religion of hate and
Yes.
violence, it turns it into what it actually was intended to be, which is a religion of peace, human solidarity, help for the poor, conviviality, and wisdom and humility. Muhammad didn't, he didn't understand all the details of the cosmos. He was humble.
We can discuss that. We can discuss the translation and the Turkish Ministry of Religion. They're not short of money. In Cambridge, I think they built that mosque, by Dr. Winter, amazing organic mosque in Cambridge.
Was that Turkish?
As far as I know, Dr. Abdul Hakim Winter, it was a Turkish investment in Cambridge.
Right. No, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, thank
okay.
you.
Well, thank you for, thanks for that clarification. Okay, yeah. Anyone else wants to come in before the next speaker? Okay, let me butt in again, since you're talking about things like a new theological narrative, to use or resistance.
Yeah.
You're right. When I was in Edinburgh University, by the way, I just checked from my university, they've got books on eschatology. By Western, Western authors. Is a great publishing house like Oxford and Cambridge University. They've got an eschatology series on original, source material. But my same university, I remember one great book, Professor Norman, is it Daniel, quite a while ago. He wrote The Making of an Image in Islam in the West. People like Hegscliff, it's unbelievable. You'll say, what do you mean unbelievable? Well, that chart you showed, yeah? I'm not joking. My interpretation of him, he's head of the US military. He wants another $1.5 trillion. Unbelievable. Someone think I'm making up all these figures. Another $1.5 trillion to basically, the way he would look at the chart, he would say they are the targets to be bombed out. That is demonic.
It is demonic.
I think that is how he is thinking. He's got the, Jerusalem Crusader symbol and Kafir tattooed on his body. He's heading up the biggest military in the world. So the problem is that we've got a mindset. There's no point blaming white Europeans. It's demonic. I used to be a well-known anti-racist, tackling the Eurocentric, the Eurocentric dimension to knowledge history. But I think what we're dealing with is the demonic mindset that's running riot. So anyway, there's a resource, The Making of an Image, Islam in the West. And unfortunately, this also touches what we were talking before the conference about Jahiliyyah, ignorance, not just demonism.
Yes. Is
that the people in power in Europe, unfortunately, as Islam, it's all full of converts from 0 to 2 billion, over 1400 years, because it has been a successful religion, it was seen as a threat, especially in Europe by those in power. It's like business. You got two shops. One shop is growing and growing, and the other one is getting worried. So unfortunately, the white European and Sheikh Imran Hussein, who eulogizes Russians, should think straight. I'm talking about white Europeans, is that includes, in other words, not just Protestant Catholics, but Orthodox, Unfortunately, Islam's rise over 1400 years was viewed by the Christians in Europe, and I mean all of them,
Can I just interrupt just a minute? Because,
go on.
We're gonna ask you to take the floor in a minute. Can I just ask Inga Mehta to say her thing?
Yes.
And make a final point before I formally hand over. Our next session will be on Islamic attitudes to the devil, and Moeen's our key speaker. So We're
So,
going to hear in depth. Inga, what was your point? Yeah.
my point is here on Hegseth is like he's crystallizing undercurrent that is driven by something that's not visual, or it's on the internet. It's a click-based extreme hate against women empowered by men. And this is not visual for the religious community and not for the academics, but it's like a cult growing from the inside. And it's called the manosphere. And I'm going to share the link of the manosphere because it's really evil and is based on demonic understanding of the young men as superior to women and Christian fanatic and nationalistic fanatic. And I think we have to, let me see if I can share that. Yeah. So the manosphere is like a undercurrent concept that is rising in the movement, in the political movement in the US, based on fanatic identification of being man in the US, and a Christian man, and with his power over everything. So
Right.
and it's based. So that is my we. And the other thing I comes to my mind is the evil of Julia Kristeva and the French hope that we had a global identity that was part of the globalist movement in the 90s up to year 2000. But then suddenly things has been crashed. There is no globalist. It's if you're a global identity with multicultural identity and religious faith, who we are as human beings, it is actually not existing, at least in the Western world these days, and
Wow.
so
Well, I'd like to can I just comment on that?
Yes, please.
The good news is, no, the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy is a global looking, inquiring, intellectual endeavor to keep the best sides of globalism alive. Exactly what you're talking about, French thought.
Exactly.
And I was brought up in Paris. My mother was a Francophile, so I've ended up in France. So that's still going. The oversimplification of the manosphere, very important point. Thanks for raising that. We are going to talk about the gender aspect of all this when we come on to discuss the Epstein files after lunch. And we're going to, if you can then make some comments there, that's really important, because the dehumanization of women as sex objects and so on by Epstein is at the heart of all this sort of evil that you rightly talk about. And also so there are many, many things to unpack here, and we will be doing so. So look, can I just thank everyone for your comments, and to say that, I will share the text of what my remarks were later. But let's move on now, and we're going to look at the devil and Islamic thought. This is a very important, obviously, section, because they're using the idea which was around in the medieval times, that Muhammad was diabolic, that Islam was evil, that therefore the righteous crusader had to go and destroy them. That was all wrong, false, oversimplified. The Quran was first translated into Latin in Cluny Abbey, where Peter Abelard took refuge down the road from me in Burgundy. So there's another tradition in Christianity which understood that Islam has got tremendous contributions, and we should be working to defeat the devil together. What the devil has done very creatively is split us apart. So let's hear from our Muslim speaker. What are your views on the devil and Islamic thought? He's going to give us a talk called An Independent Islamic Overview of the Current Global Polycrisis. So it's a big mission he's set himself. So, and Moeen, I just want to introduce him as a very learned graduate from the University of Edinburgh. He studied mainly economics and history of economic thought. He's been an activist for social and economic justice for many years. He set up Global Vision 2000 in, I think, 2000, and has been doing a one-man, catalyst role, a bit like me with my institute. We met way back then, but we've we've come closer together because of this current world situation. It's important that there was a saying in Old Middle English, good wits do jump. And this is the logo of my institute, which is people of goodness and intelligence should collaborate and jump the gaps between them. So anyway, Moeen, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. He's joining us from Istanbul here.
Thank you, Thomas. In eschatology and indeed the world, things that are not meant to happen do happen unexpected. If you don't mind, I had a word with Simon, and some other Muslim speakers from India, elsewhere, because of some logistics. Could Simon speak before me, Then I will speak after him.
Well, the trouble with that theory is that Simon's on the panel that's looking at the devil in Christian thought. And that is coming up this afternoon. He's got other speakers with him. So I don't think that's going to work.
Okay, fine.
Let's stick with the Muslim theme for this.
Okay, fine. It's not a problem. Yeah. It's just I was going to, accommodate other speakers. Something's happened on my screen. What's happened on the screen?
We've got Inga Meta sharing. She's stopped now, so that's all right.
Right. Okay. That's fine, Simon. No problem. I was just trying to accommodate other speakers because
I know
different locations.
You're always very generous, but let's stick to the program.
Okay, fine. So look, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Just a correction on what Thomas said. I did study economics, but I switched in 1980 to Edinburgh University. So my first degree is Arabic. I'm not Arabic, but I studied Arabic, Middle East, Islamic, and Comparative Civilization, Edinburgh University, and then education. But certainly in my work, Islamic political economy has been, indeed, the Islamic vision has been articulated, and it's on our website. Well, look, I've got a lot to go through, and I'll try to do justice. My voice is audible.
Audible. We can hear you, sir.
That's, as I did say, audible there. It just shows you the stress that we're all going through. This bombing of the planet is taking a toll. So anyway, so I'm audible. Okay. So look, firstly, let me see. What I'm going to talk about is based on, it's not some Muslim genius or idiot speaking and his views. I'm really being inspired, other than the Quran, by the Kitab al-Fitan, the Book of Trial and Tribulation. In the WhatsApp group, those who aren't on it, like Ingar or Sean and Ian, if you send me your mobile numbers, I can put you on it. But I've shared it on the WhatsApp group, that source, the Book of Trial and Tribulation. After the Quran, it's in the recorded unauthorized sayings of the Prophet. I don't want to go into that because anything I'm going to say, you could do a conference on it. So the Kitab al-Fitan is where the inspiration is coming from. And that is the recordings of what the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said about 1400 years ago. So these are just introductory remarks. Secondly, in my presentation, everything is going to be brief. I'm going to talk about how Muslims look at Islamic history. We're on phase 5, which covers basically end times, or this phase of end times. And then the next end times and the dark period, the tribulation of this dark period of end times. And then I'm going to touch on Adam, the creation of Adam, and the real enemy of humanity, the devil. The real war that's upon us, and we don't even articulate it as humans, as humanity, is the war by the devil on humanity. That is the big war, which, as I said, we're starting with the media stops. So the big war is the shaitan, the devil, whatever you want to call him, on humanity. That's a real battle. And then briefly touch on the Dajjal the Muslim concept of the false Messiah, the Antichrist, Imam Mahdi, huge, one can do a conference on that, and the global reset. And I'm going to argue basically in all this chaos and their vision, you know, those who rule the world, you know, they talk about global reset, it's going to backfire. And in the Islamic vision, the global reset is going to be a return to what you call Islam. By Islam, I mean universal values of Islam for all of humanity. So that's going to be a big, what's the word, U-turn that humanity is going to go through. It's going to be unexpected, and it's going to be, what's the word, dare I say, traumatic, and I like for the future. The other opening comments is that in eschatology, we need to look at methodology. There is no doubt about it, because of what I'm saying involves power, you know, power and control of the world, of minds and humanity, is that Islamic theologians, welcome Dr. Professor Ansar, he might take on board Thomas's request from the Quran. But yeah, the point I'm making is what I'm going to talk about, you know, the Islamic vision in these times has been, I think the word is censored massively by vested powers in the Middle East, especially the Middle East. Well, throughout the Islamic world, but especially Middle East. For instance, Mecca, Medina universities and the Imams, and Al-Azhar, because it challenges dictatorship and power. Because with the Imam Mahdi coming in a universal Islamic order, they don't want to talk about that. I'm happy, you know, with having the seat, you know, the mentality of the rulers. I'm okay, Jack. The last thing they want to hear about is Imam Mahdi and overthrowing or changing the system. And finally, opening remarks, because I've not got time to talk about it. The current situation, you know, geopolitics and current affairs, it's quite clear Israel and US had a plan. You know, the Quran talks about it. He says the people who oppose you, the disbelievers, will have a plan. So there was a plan in this war. But Allah says in the Quran, He is the best of the planners. And their plan has basically backfired. You know, they wanted to decapitate. I mean, I know they talk about differences, US and Israeli, but there is unity of purpose and vision. Maybe different emphasis. But basically, their plan was to decapitate the Iranian regime. And they did, you know, they did take out the Ayatollah Khamenei, may he be rest in peace, and others. But the Iranians had planned, you know, resilience and springing back. So basically, the idea wasn't just regime change, but to destroy Iran as a power. Why? Because if you're going to have a strong Israel and an expansionist Israel, you don't want any rivals. And that includes where I'm speaking from, Turkey, Iran, and countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia. They don't want any rivals. And since 9/11, they've been taking out countries one by one. So there is a plan. And I'm surprised it's taken so long to go for some sort of knockout with Iran. You know, after 9/11, we had, you know, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. So that is, it's not over. That is the purpose, not just to get rid of the Ayatollah, but to destroy Iran as a power to rival Israel. And the Americans, like Venezuela, I think they're more keen about energy, controlling oil and stealing it, as a matter of fact. That type of attitude, and hurting their enemies again, if not Iran, China, for instance. So that's my view on what's happening. And what else? Yes, as I mentioned, there is a global reset plan where Israel takes over the Middle East by destroying its rivals or weakening them. But I believe that what we're seeing is going to be the end of the Anglo-American Zionist Empire and Pax Judaica. Even if we have a temporary bloating or ballooning of Israel, temporary, is going to burst, and you're going to get the return of universal Islam. So that is my summary. Now let me go into it. The Islamic history I mentioned very briefly. Muslim, historians view Islamic history as 5 phases. The phase of Muhammad, alayhi salam, the prophethood, 610 to 632. The Khilafat Rashidun, 632 to 661 roughly two. That's the period of the rightly guided caliphs, where Islam really exploded and took on the 2 superpowers of the age, the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid. And then you could argue it's gone haywire, Islamic history. You know, we're human after all. I suppose that's the interference of the devil also. There was a phase called the biting kingship, you know, the Umayyad regime, dynasty, Abbasid, maybe even Mamluks. And then the 4th stage is oppressive kingship. I think some commentators refer to imperialism. And then after imperialism, last century or two, tyrannical dictatorships or authoritarian regimes. So these are what some Islamic commentators divide Islamic history into. And the next stage, the dictatorships in Islamic, you know, Eschatology and Kitab al-Fitan, Book of Trial and Tribulation, is that the universal Khilafat, you know, the kingdom of God, to use English term, is going to return. So that is where we're at. We're at the transition between dictatorship. These are not my views. I'm just telling you what the vision is. That it is conceptualized that this era of the Muslim world is going to pivot, change, where basically divine law, which is marginalized or whatever, is going to return back in the Islamic world and indeed globally. So enough of that. Yep. So that's Islamic history summed up in a few minutes. Next thing, yes, just to clarify that slightly, is I mentioned the Israeli and US objective. The Israeli objective is also to demolish the Al-Aqsa, not just mosque, but compound. They want to build their, I mean, this is explicit, their 3rd temple. Not just for the sake of it, but to be a seat of power for their leader or Messiah. That's another reason they want to eliminate Iran or any powers. They don't want any backlash, serious backlash, which could destroy them. So that was another clarification. In terms of the phase that we are moving into, that I mentioned, you know, from dictatorship era to the return of the Caliphate, is that there's a word in Arabic called fitna duhaima. I've checked this up carefully. Without going into details, it's a period or a trial and tribulation in which black clouds, literally black clouds, will envelop the world. And I don't want to go too much into that, but we can use our imagination and state that this black darkness could mean the use of nuclear weapons. It will be temporary. It will not be the end of the world, but it will be a very, what's the word, literally dark period. I don't want to go too much into that, but some commentators have clarified that. It's an interpretation. Okay, now let's come to the real war. And this will surprise people, despite what people who want to, you know, re-articulate a new modern crusade against Islam are saying. What is the real battle? Well, I mean, there's no doubt about it that this is a pivotal time that we're all going through globally. And obviously Muslims need to unite, that they're under attack. There is a danger of the Iranians being pitched against the Arabs by global kufr. As I said, they do have a plan. So let's go to the Muslim view on Adam and Satan in English, or Shaitan, the spiritual war. Again, this is going to be very brief, although I put up the videos. Basically, the Muslim view is that before, there are three creations. Let's go to basics. There are three creations by God. One is man or Adam made of clay. Physical, us, all of us. We're from one origin, if you want to call it that, Adam, Eve. And so you got one creation in Islamic theology. Second creation is the angels, made of light, eternal. Adam has also got free will. Angels do not. They're made of light. Total obedience, been there from the beginning of creation. The third one is very important. I think Muslims have got more knowledge about it, I think, is the creation of what we call jinn. These are creations made of fire, smokeless fire, and they also, they do have free will. And from my understanding, because I've gone back to basics, many Muslims even don't know this. According to Islamic theology, they were living on this planet before us, and they were as complex as us. They had tribes, nations, they were Christians, Muslims, Jews amongst them. They procreated. But what we don't know is they can change their form and influence the humans. They can materialize, and they are good and bad. Okay, so you'll say, what's all that got to do with now? Well, according to the Muslim belief, Adam was created out of clay, different from light and smokeless fire, to be the Khalifatullah. And that is a stage where Islamic history is moving to, the return of a divine state. Khilafah means the representative of God. The Adam had a purpose in creation if God already had angels made of light, total submission, and the jinn, made of smokeless fire. So, however, one of the jinn, again, this will surprise people, even me actually, one of the jinn, his name wasn't Shaitan originally, it was called Azazel, A-Z-A-Z, W-E-L. There was a jinn called Azazel, very, God-fearing, totally submissive. This is the devil. He was unbelievable. He was highly regarded in that realm. His name was Azazel, according to Islam. However, all in God's wisdom on the creation of man, when he was, made, and there's stages of the evolution of man, first the material, then putting the spirit into him. Anyway, the bottom line is basically he rebelled. How dare I have to bow down? There was a command for all the angels. By the way, he had been elevated from a jinn made of fire into heaven with angels. That's the Muslim belief anyway. He was the only jinn elevated because of his God-fearing nature to enter the realm of the angels and heaven, dare I say. But the view is that on the creation of Adam, basically he rebelled, and the origins, and that was the origins of racism. I'm better than you. You're made of clay. I made of light or whatever, fire. In his case, fire, jinn. It's more subtle than that, pride, arrogancy, etc. But anyway, that's the nub of it. And he was basically expelled. But on condition, he asked God that, let me have my way with this creation. And he was granted that respite. So both Adam, he was tested, as you know, we believe in that story, and the tree, the apple, forbidden fruit. So, by the way, Muslims do believe, there was transgression in the Garden of Eve, but we believe there was no original sin. He asked for forgiveness and repentance, so there is no original sin concept in Islam, and there's no need for a savior who died for you or whatever to get rid of the original sin. We believe that he asked for genuine repentance and forgiveness, and he was. So that's his story. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically, So basically, and God also gave a special status to Adam in Surah Baqarah, Quran, Surah Anbiya, that he taught man the names, the knowledge of everything. In other words, Adam was created with not just free will, but certain knowledge or knowledges that others were not given. I think I've said enough on that. So that's the original, story pre-Adam and pre our, existence on this planet. So that's that. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that our enemy isn't the black man or the white man. It's not between ourselves, or even faiths for that matter. Muslims don't believe there's only one God and one religion transmitted through 124,000 prophets. It's the devil. Obviously, if you don't believe in God or the devil, you haven't got a clue. You've lost the plot. Total, you're in the dark. So that's that. Right, next point. The next character is the Dajjal. Yes. Now, according to Muhammad alayhi salam and the hadith, the traditions I mentioned, is that this creature is going to be the biggest trial and tribulation in end times. I'm sure there's others, but this is the biggest one that's been mentioned. Dajjal comes from the Arabic Dajjala, to deceive. Dajjal is the material form of deception in a human form, but he's got extraordinary powers. But he is human. Dajjal is a creature. He is the imposter, the deceiver. The real name is Masih al-Dajjal, false Messiah. In other words, he's also the Antichrist. Now, this is also connected to Dajjaliyat. I would conceptualize that as the age of deception. In other words, we are actually, although he's not here, but his world is here. Materialist, atheistic, secular for that matter. Structure, world order is here. I mean, if that's not the Dajjal order, I don't know what is. A prophet is everything, etc., etc. So his world is already here, but he is not materialized yet. So we're at that stage in end times, not just having dictatorships in East and West, North and South, but where he's going to manifest himself. And I think the Hadith really mentions an era of chaos, wars and chaos. Again, I don't want to go into that, but that's a good summary. I would go further. It's the end of empire. Which empire? What is the empire just now? The Anglo-American Zionist empire. So I think you got to read through the chaos. It's going to be the end of this empire, which rules the world through money power and through military power. The Prophet mentioned that a Christian who became a Muslim, Tamim al-Dari, famous, narration, that he was chained even then, 1400 years ago. He was living. So he's there on an island, and he's got the word kafir, KFR, disbeliever, on his forehead. That's mentioned, but he will be, released, unchained now in end times. We're just about at that stage. I don't mean tomorrow, but neither do I mean decades. We're in that, we're coming into that stage. but before him comes the Mahdi. In my belief, I think the Imam Mahdi comes just before him. And before Imam Mahdi, the wars have started. And basically, in the Islamic belief, this character is here because, you know, everything's come to an end, a climax, like theatre, the last act. He's here to spread corruption. And also it mentions terrorize believers from belief to disbelief, you know, to deny God. So he denies God, prophecy, afterlife, and focuses on the self, you know, the material world. And also, I mentioned special powers. He is a Jew, by the way. In Islamic, what you call eschatology, he is seen to be a Jew, and he will perform miracles. Some of these miracles, like, you know, reviving the dead to life, is really the jinn, you know, these creatures I mentioned, made of fire, they can materialize, so they will fool mankind, you know, if you can materialize something out of nothing. So he will be given extra powers. So the summary there is, Azazel, the creature made of smokeless fire, who was expelled, he's got this acolyte called the Dajjal, yeah, who he report, if you want to call him, you know, he's the commander of chief. The Dajjal, you know, is controlled by the Satan. And he has an army also, talking about the Epstein file, you know, a network. It's not just powerful people doing X, Y, Z, but he's got a satanic network. So that's my reading of the situation. So basically, we are currently living in a system, and my interpretation, age of deception, the age of Dajjal, in which techno-feudalism, you know, we can now use these terms, just as surveillance, artificial intelligence of a certain nature is being imposed globally, and also to destroy morality, faith, religion, family breakdown. So the environment to create a superhero who can fix the problems, quote unquote, has been created. A superhero, and the Dajjal, the deceiver, is going to be promoted, marketed as a savior. So that's a deeper analysis. For instance, he will bring the dead to life, from hunger to abundance, from drug to rain. His paradise is really hell, and hell is heaven. So basically, we believe he'll come out of either Khorasan, which is Iran, or Syria, Iraq. There are different hadiths. So he's going to come out of that region. And he's going to transform from being a reformer to, you know, a superhero savior of the world, to a prophet, to a god. But basically, he's going to say, I'm God, in his Islamic, what you call eschatology. And the way to protect yourself against him, we have the Surah Kaf, in which we're meant to read the 10, what you call, verses. Right, enough of that. The only other thing I want to say is that the devil, Shaitan, Dajjal, and the evil jinn, there is a connection. I think Matt Eric is going to speak about this. There is a connection with the worshipping of Lucifer. In the Middle East, there's an ancient god called Baal worship. And some experts were linking Little St. James Island or Temple with a global satanic ritual, what's the word? Network. I've said enough on that. So what was I really saying there? What I was really saying is that is the real enemy of humanity. But given the nature of this enemy, he's put us at loggerheads with each other, yeah, fighting each other. So that's that. Finally, not finally, but another point, getting there. One character who's not really understood in Islamic eschatology by Muslims and non-Muslims properly is the appearance of a great personality. As you know, the Christians are expecting Jesus, the Messiah, the second coming. The Jews are expecting the Moshiach. But the Muslims are expecting the not return, but the appearance of Imam Mahdi. Mahdi means rightly guided. I also refer to, the transition from different phases in Islamic history, like dictatorship to the universal Islamic order. So Imam Mahdi has a critical, pivotal role to play in that. And basically, he's coming from a timeline before the end of the world. Yeah, that's when the earth ends, creation ends, no sun, mountains destroyed, seas evaporate. That's called the Sat, the hour. And then you got the day of resurrection. So you got the day of resurrection. Before that comes the hour, but before the hour comes the Mahdi, the Dajjal, and Isa, Jesus. I believe that the wars that we're seeing in the Middle East, because that is the stage, really, I think we're there now, or we're at that stage where these three characters are going to come. The Imam Mahdi, the Dajjal, the Antichrist, what we call him, Jewish Messiah, and then Jesus. I think we've entered that period now. I mean now. I don't mean the Gaza war, but especially the Iran war. Yeah, because it seems to be out of control. What else do I want to say about the Mahdi? He's a human. He's from the family of the Prophet, from Fatima, the line of Fatima, if you want to be specific. And it's the duty of Muslim, Sunni, Shia globally to support him. And there is a sign, a very explicit sign, leaving aside voices coming from heaven. There is one clear sign, several signs about his appearance. Basically, it's when there is, to cut a long story short, civil war in Saudi Arabia. That's my interpretation. So basically, when there is conflict amongst after the death of a king, that's what the Eschatology says. There will be a fight for leadership. That's when he comes. At a time of commotion, I would say civil unrest, maybe civil war in Saudi Arabia. And he appears, he's from Medina, but comes in Mecca. And I'll go further, this will interest you, because we've got information about him. There will be several Muslim armies who go for him. One is from Greater Sham, and the earth envelopes it. That's another sign. Greater Sham could be Palestine, Jordan, Syria, that area. That's what Sham means. So that will come for him when he declares he's the Mahdi. And there'll be another army. I don't want to go into this, it's confusing. But basically he moves to Ghouta, which is Damascus. He moves from Saudi Arabia to Syria or Damascus. And then there's another war with the Romans. 80 flags, presumably armies from Rome, come to attack him. It mentions 1 million strong army. Is that specific? I don't want to go into all of that, but that battle is going to be in Greater Syria. It's the border where I am, the border of Turkey and Syria. What happens and all that, I don't want to go into that, but Muslims will come out on top. And that's when the Mahdi meets Jesus because the Dajjal appears then, when he thinks he's losing, or his armies are losing, he appears. But that's when the Mahdi meets Jesus in Damascus. And the honor to kill this evil force or this Dajjal is given to Jesus, not the Mahdi. So that's that. So I think that's a lot to cover, actually. By the way, what I've said, many so-called Muslim eschatologists, I've studied them. They're all over the place. For instance, the Imam Mahdi, you got the Shia version and the Sunni version, It's almost two different people. If you study it carefully, I don't want to go into all of that. So I'm above all of that, There is an Imam Mahdi. I'm trying to look at it from a universal angle. And then also the destruction of Israel. Does it happen before the coming of Imam Mahdi or when he comes? Again, there's a debate. I don't want to go into that. As I said, currently what we're seeing is the end of the Anglo, not just Jewish state, but the Anglo-American Zionist empire, which is global. So I think that's already happening. Okay, it's not fallen, but it's happening. I think I've said enough. How long did I take, Thomas, to cover that as a matter of interest?
Yeah, no, that's fine. You've gone. We're at 11:40, so we have 20
excellent.
minutes.
No,
Minutes
excellent.
for questions now.
Yeah, okay, fine. I'm done. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yes, we've had. That's quite a, a detailed study of the themes, eschatology, and the devils in Islam. So thank you very much to Moeen. I've got some questions, but before I go, can anyone else come in and ask anything you like, really? Maybe put your electronic hand up is a good way to go. And it's lots of food for thought. I just want to. Well, I'll ask. Oh, James. Yeah. Hello. Greetings. Did you want to ask a question of Moeen? You'll have to unmute. Yeah.
Who wants to speak?
Yeah. Now, if you want to say something now, ask your question. Go for it. Yeah.
Well, it's really a little bit of a criticism rather than a question. I'm afraid that although the religions like Islam and Christianity have done a lot of good in the world in making people behave properly, they are based on mythology, really, and I don't think one should put too much emphasis on what was said 2,000 years ago about what might happen now. I think that is a little bit of a, it takes our mind off the current problem and what we're faced with. I rather like your Thomas's philosophy, which is about emulating the space race and making that, turning that into something useful for peace. Peace isn't quite as glossy on the face of it, but I'd like to say that it is. It means peace. It means progress. It means development of ideas, and it means honesty and being decent to everybody, forgetting about war and conflict, resolving conflicts peacefully by argument and so on. And that should really be the sort of glossy result that we're aiming for. To sell that to the public might be difficult because they think, well, they don't think, but it's something which is taken for granted, really, even though it actually isn't happening at the moment. So that's all I wanted to say at the moment.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. That was, an important point. I mean, can I just ask a supplementary question before others come in, which is, as you were talking about the Islamic end times kind of scenario, I was just thinking, people like Hegseth, they have their own similar kind of eschatology going on in their heads. And both of them seem to me to be quite violent. As a peace scholar, I just observe, and when I've researched this business about the Dajjal and the Islamic end times ideas, they didn't actually start with Muhammad. As far as I can work out, and I may be corrected here, but all the sources I've looked at, it's not in the Quran. This isn't Quranic. It came, it's not even in the first few decades of early Islam. These ideas of an eschatological battle between the Dajjal and the return of Christ and the eventual move towards a righteous world came quite a bit later and was very much influenced by Syrian Christian notions. The apocalyptic ideas that got into early Islam were picked up from that community, it appears. And really they were copying the script of these Christian apocalyptic thinking and then converting them into an Islamic flavor. Now, all I would comment is that, and those in turn were partly influenced by Jewish thinking, as I'll be sharing later when we look at the devil in Judaism. So I'm just wondering if what we need isn't like, I mean, Maim was basically saying, well, you're wrong. It's the Islamic version that's going to triumph and we're going to win after lots of battles and millions of people are going to die and all that, but we're going to win. And that's kind of what Hegseth is saying. He's reading his version of the script and saying, you're wrong, Moeen. We're the Christians. We're going to win because it says so in the book of Revelations, and we're going to win. What James has said to us, and maybe we should take it on board, is maybe we just should back off all those end time scripts and look at them, as I was suggesting, through the lens of modern scholarship, humanistic studies, archaeology, history, linguistics. Look at this stuff actually as scholars and say, look, these scripts are all very interesting, fascinating for that time. But if we apply them through the lens of psycho-eschatology, we can realize why these people thought all that stuff. And now we can do it in a more sophisticated way. We can skip to the good news, the end, the happy ending. We don't have to go through all those wars and tribulations because, yeah, that's what they feared. And tragically, people that believe that are running that script. We have to stop them running those scripts, I would say, and move to the happy ending, which was the opening of the Golden Gate or whatever, symbolically. And I would argue, as a humanist scholar, that we have the power and right to do that. In fact, we have the duty to do that. But anyway, that's my question. I mean, would you be really upset, Maine, if we cancel the ultimate battle and we have a peace solution instead? Would you be really upset?
I will reply to that, but Simon wants to intervene, and so does Inga. I'd like to hear what they got to say.
Well, hear them as well first.
Yeah, I'll hear everyone.
Yeah. Inga, you go next. I think we're next. Yeah, you'll have to unmute.
Over to Simon first.
Oh, okay, Simon goes first.
Simon, you go. Yeah.
Oh, hello, thank you. Yeah, stop the script is easier said than done, isn't it? But it's something that sort of I think resonates. I mean, we must find the beauty and diversity that was mentioned at the beginning, and it isn't. I agree with you, Thomas, that it's not about winning an ideological battle. But at the same time, if I read what Moeen is saying correctly, I don't think he's saying that it's an ideology that is personally felt in a visceral way that is trying to be achieved. I think it's more the belief that this is what our faith teaches is going to happen, and therefore it's not personal and not like an animated response to circumstances. It's more believing that this is the divine will. The difficulty is, I think, though, with all people of all faiths, is that you've got the idea of what the person believes God is saying, and what the key authorities and the people that are respected who have gravitas within that faith tradition, they will give various comments, and they might possibly be giving them a speculation, but others in the movement, as it were, pick it up as some form of embedded doctrine, and then they get their own personal egos associated with the promulgation of the idea, and perhaps even further than that, they become what you might call active in trying to make things actually happen. So I'm kind of sort of thinking out loud here, really, in response to the question, but I think very interesting points raised by James and yourself, Thomas, and be interested to hear what how Marion responds to it.
Okay, let's thank you very much, Simon. Inga, could you be succinct? I want to bring in Dr. Taslim Rahmani, who's joined us and who's our second speaker under the Islamic.
Yes.
Very
Dr.
quickly.
Balawi is also about to come, the Palestinian, he's agreed. But yeah, carry on.
What was your point, Inga? Did you want to briefly make, and then we'll move to...
Yes. When talking about the Great Reset, my mind goes to Davos, and the Great Reset is kind of the ultimate apocalyptic, both from a Christianity perspective and the Muslim perspective. So the Great Reset for the World Economic Forum is one thing, and when last time I was traveling from Istanbul to Dubai, of course it was Euphrates Tigris, the rivers belt, going down the so-called beautiful gardens, the hanging gardens of Babylonia. So for me, this brings the Babylonic confusion of languages. It's still existing. So that's like where is the entrance for the confusion that we have between humans.
Sure.
And then and then when it comes to this ancient history of the desertification of the planet, also been living in Egypt and in the oasis of Siwa, seeing the desertification, there is something that is a lack of resources, lack of beauty. The gardens are dying. So there is a narrative here, which is beyond the easy reasoning of the present day of religious fanatism.
Sure.
Those are all. But just let's bring again all the way back to Egypt and Akhenaten. The Akhenaten on the one God behind the sun. So that is it's a beginning here, which is going back to the Egyptian civilization and even before.
Sure. Those are really important points, but can I just ask you to park those? Because we're focusing mostly here on the Islamic tradition in this section. We'll come back to you in a minute, okay? What I'd like is for to ask our dear friend Dr. Taslim Rahmani. You've just joined us, I believe, from India, sir. This is your chance to share with us your views of the subject to do with Islamic understandings of the devil. Would you like to take the floor briefly? It's important we hear your voice. I believe Dr. Taslim is the Secretary General President of the Muslim Political Council of India, and I'm a great lover of India. I've been there many times, and I've been meeting many different scholars there. So please take the floor and tell us how things look from the Indian perspective.
Thomas, can I just, we're at question time, can I just answer those 3 points? And then we've also got, for your information, our Palestinian guest, Dr. Balawi.
I'm trying to fit everyone in.
Sure, of course. But let me quickly respond to the questions, and then Dr. Taslim and Dr. Balawi, they are our special guests at the beginning. Dr. James Thring mentioned that Islamic eschatology and others sound mythology. I mentioned to you, in this planet, many people are atheists, secularists and disbelievers. Now, the point is, there are many, you're entitled to your opinion, James, but what Muslims and Jews or Christians believe in their holy books, they believe in it. And it should not, if you're going to have a dialogue of respect, you cannot just say that the Quran is mythology or the Bhagavad Gita or Bible is mythology. It might be, you're entitled to your opinion, but to billions of people and some of the intellectuals here who are coming from faith traditions, that's not on, right? So otherwise, there's not going to be any discussion, proper discussion, point 1. Point 2, Many people, when they listen to the Islamic eschatology of Imam Mahdi, yeah, Dajjal, and Isa, and the notion of conflict, they think, oh, that's awful, that's messy. But excuse me, if you're going to look at how it's about not peace, it's about justice, universal justice. You need to look in the mirror. You'll say, what mirror? The last 400 or 500 years. And if you look carefully at the last 400 or 500 years, it has been full of brutal violence, mass violence by European empires, let me be specific, white European empires who have inflicted massive violence, genocide, starvation. Even now, many Europeans, why have they not intervened in Palestine? Because, I'll tell you why, they have done the same to people in Africa, in the Americas, and in Australia. It's not new. So if there is going to be, a rebalance, it is inevitably not going to say to Mr. Oppressor, Mr. Pharaoh, excuse me, Mr. Pharaoh, put your nuclear weapons down, put your aeroplanes down, give me a break. If you want to have a dialogue, have a serious dialogue. It's going to involve conflict, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry for being strong, but that is the reality. You cannot have universal peace or without justice. And justice involves a conflict at all levels, spiritual, emotional, psychological, material, military, against the two opposition forces. That is what the Quran says, haqq and battle, right? The conflict between truth and falsehood is going to be like the Pharaoh. The current global system is pharaonic. It is Dajjalic. Right, I've said enough, and I would welcome Dr. Balawi, who's representing the Palestinian experience, and Dr. Taslim, esteemed prominent guest to speak. Who do you suggest first, Thomas?
Well, I was thinking the order was Dr. Balawi.
I would like to listen to Dr. Balawi first, then
let's
I'll
hear
have
from.
comment.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Balawi, I believe you're Secretary General of the League for Al-Quds and Palestine, and acting President of the Union of Palestinian Academics, and also President of the Asia Middle East Forum in Istanbul. So you bring to this meeting a lot of experience. Tell us your views. You've read the program. We're talking about, what's happening in the world, how we can stop this chaos. And what's the role of the devil in contemporary history? Please tell us your thoughts on all these problems. You must have thought about this a lot.
Thank you very much. And my thanks to the organizers and my colleagues here. Yesterday, we have a discussion over the latest Israeli legislation on executing Palestinian prisoners. It was something of a very strange situation because Israel has passed a legislation where it could execute Palestinian prisoners while doesn't really treat Jews in the same way. So if an Israeli or a Jewish Israeli commits the crime of murder, he will be basically looked down upon, but nothing happens to him in practice. He might go for jail for maybe a few months or years, I don't know. But if a Palestinian who is defending his homeland is involved in an act of killing another Israeli settler, then he is to be hanged. So now legislation depends on your race, your religion, and this is the situation we are in the West Bank and Palestine, and it reflects the way of thinking. How do these people look at the other people, the Goyim, they call us. So we are the people of the land, and we believe really that we descend from the original children of Israel. We became Christians, then we became Muslims. So now we are the original people of the land, are tried by foreigners who came and occupied our land, and now they want to execute us. They were always proud about being more civilized, more westernized, more European in a way. Although in our history, we always thought that this is the cradle of civilization. And in that way, we consider ourselves the most civilized people in the whole world. But yet, in that way, we are considered to be backward and yet receive this kind of treatment. I would like also to remind myself and everyone in Palestine before the foundation of the Israeli state, we were living together as neighbors and brothers and sometimes relatives, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. So just a small example, my sister-in-law, she is married to a Palestinian man whose mother is Jewish. She was a Palestinian Jew. So Jews actually, although they were few in number, but they were our neighbors and friends, let alone Christians and other religions. So this is a situation we ended up in. And yet we look at the situation in Jerusalem, we see Christian and Muslim holy sites closed under the pretext of the war with Iran, and it is dangerous for worshippers to go to these holy places, while Jewish holy places are not receiving the same treatment. So Jewish holy places are open, yet Christian and Muslim holy places are closed. So everyone now thinks in a way that these people, fanatic Zionists, they are thinking of erecting the third temple. So it's a great chance to close the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which they call Temple Mount. And they could destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque and build their third temple, claiming that it was, for example, an Iranian missile or that destroyed the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And also they don't shy, they are not shy of saying such things openly nowadays because many thanks to social media, now even people are recording their own crimes. And let's also keep in mind that the situation in Gaza Strip hasn't improved. The genocide continues. Since the ceasefire, nothing really changed. Border crossings are still closed to passengers. So the people who were stuck inside Gaza, students, maybe relatives who came to visit their kins or other relatives, are still stuck there inside Gaza since 3 years now. No universities, no schools, no roads, no water lines, no electricity, nothing. So they are completely forgotten by the world. And even now, humanitarian assistance is in the minimum. Let's remember that we have thousands and thousands of injured Palestinians who are not able to go outside Gaza Strip to receive treatment. And when we listen to the current American ambassador to Israel, Mr. Huckabee, he simply says that Israelis, Jews, whatever, are entitled of having not only historical Palestine, but the whole region, including Jordan, Iraq, and part of Saudi Arabia, and also maybe Lebanon, Syria, southern Turkey, because he said that God promised Abraham of this land, so the Israelis are the descendants of Abraham, so they don't have to give back the land they occupied in 1967, where the Palestinian state should be founded. So there is not only no two-state solution, but he wants to make Israel the regional hegemon of this area and the master of the old world, because this is, of course, the crossroad of all civilization. So people like Netanyahu are talking about a messianic vision where the Jewish Messiah would descend and where they will have that golden millennia and they will rule the whole world. But what we have seen up to now, that they are engaging in a kind of global war, not only against Muslims and the people of Palestine, Egypt, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria, Lebanon, Iran, but also against the values of the Western world and even the people, the Americans, who are being used for very evil end. They are sacrificing American economy, American people to just prepare the world for the coming of the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, who will kill everyone except Jews, and the rest of the people who will remain, the Goyim, will only stay as a servant of the remaining Jews. So this kind of mentality that now rules the world, and unfortunately, Americans are almost blind, and they are going after this crazy people and this crazy ideology almost mindlessly. And hopefully, I don't know what's a way out of this situation, but as Palestinians, we'll fight to the end and think as also intellectuals, we should pressurize more, we should practice more pressure on Israel and its enablers to make them feel the heat of their decision and their crimes, including boycotting their intellectuals, universities, products maybe, and also kicking them out from international organizations, including International Parliamentary Union, which will be held maybe in a few days in Istanbul. So by the way, we applied for an observer member in this organization, but we were denied this status, while Israel comes as a full-fledged member and spreads their lies and their twisted narrative everywhere. Thank you very much, and wish you all the best.
Right. Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah. I think we won't take questions. We'll move on to Dr. Taslim next and then have some discussion after both of you, because we're sort of running out of time here. But what you said is very important. We'll respond shortly. Dr. Taslim, can you tell us, your perspective on this topic from the Indian Muslim community?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Moin, Dr. Balawi, and all the panelists, worthy panelists over here. Very good afternoon from India to everybody, and my greetings to all of you. Very briefly, basically, you know, I'm a student of geopolitics as well as history. So with a few historical perspective, I shall start by submission in a very brief way that all of you learned and worthy people know that the evolution of mankind clubbed with the evolution of religions has started from the Asian continent, right from the beginning of the humanity, be it the Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or the Hinduism, or whatever. The most prevalent religions has come from the Asian soil. As well as it seems like a coincidence that most of the world resources, be it the oil or it is the minerals or the seasons or the terrains, everything it is available in this region in an abundant way. So the evolution of religions, civilizations, industry, trade, cultures, a worthy thing has started from the Asian continent. Although we have the seven continents across the globe, Europe also has so many things which has contributed to this world, and everybody must respect that. But what we are looking for last at least 300 years, war is a human nature. We have always watched war since the beginning of the humanity. But the way we are fighting wars nowadays, it has become so brutal, inhuman, and resource oriented that I think the world has not seen such kind of an inhumanity and such kind of uncivilized measures taken by the so-called most civilized people and most human and most democratic people, which is coming out now, particularly for last 125 years, if I may be more precise. Whatever we have seen, if we have not seen in the history during the Mongol era, the Genghis Khan era, even not that. In last 100 years, First World War, Second World War, the devastation of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, then the Vietnam, whatever we have not seen. So this history tells us that the last 100 years, this I'm sorry to quote the region, not the religion, but region. The European region has unleashed wars, very brutal, very fatal wars on the people to grab power, to grab resources, and to kill the humanity, be it the Muslims, be it the Christians, Jews, Buddhists, all over. So we must have to look. We may say, as this global vision or is committed to propagate the message that we are at the end of this world. Yes, we may be at the end, but even if we are at the end, can we afford to keep watching such a brutality? This is now for last precisely 2.5 years, that the people of Gaza in the leadership of Hamas has broken the binary, the set binary, the perception. And they have told that whatever has been shown to the world through the forces like the Zionist Israel, like the imperialist US, was a myth. And that myth has been broken by the people of Hamas. And I'm very happy that I'm sharing this platform with a responsible dignitary and a person from Hamas sitting over here in this on this screen. Mr. Balawi, I congratulate you. I congratulate your organization. I congratulate your people. I congratulate the people, 2.3 million people of Gaza who are standing under this this whole reign of this weaponry, the brutality, the killing, the small kids, the women, no industry, no school, no hospital, no doctor. And now you say, and the world is almost silent, and if not silent, is not active, that we will kill, we will execute all the Palestinians languishing innocently in the Israeli jails. The world is saying that this such kind of governments, which the ICC has already declared the war criminals inhuman, they are still tolerated. The international bodies, they are passing resolution after resolutions and not taking any practical step. The world is these civilized countries are not expelling the diplomats from Israel. The United Nations is not expelling the membership of the countries like Israel. Why? Is it enough to pass a few resolutions and then sit silent on those resolutions? Can we claim that we are human, we are civilized? And now, after this, the extension of the Gaza is the Tehran and Iran. What is the problem of to US with Iran? Iran is such a proximal state. Iran has no shared boundaries. They have nothing. They do not share any economic ties. What is the problem then? And why the Iran is bombed today? And why the nuclear threat is looming large over Iran and through the Iran over the whole region, whole Asia? So these are the things which must have to be pondered upon by each and every person who is sane in this world, or he claims that they have a thoughtful mind, or they claim that they have a heart in their bodies. If they have such things, it is not enough to come out on the street and do some protest or chanting some slogans, etc. It is very pertinent for everybody to pressurize their governments, come out on a practical way. They must boycott their diplomatically, economically, and politically. Until unless we don't do that, our claims are hollow. We condemn this war. We condemn war on Iran. We condemn the brutality to the people of Gaza. We condemn the world has said that there must be a two-nation, two-state theory for Israel and Palestine. And it's a claim for last more than half a century. But then what happened? Jerusalem forcefully has been converted to the capital of a Zionist state. And world is approving. We belong to the Abrahamical religion. True. But then what respect we give to our Abrahamical brothers and sisters? Nothing. These are very serious issues that everybody shall stand together, everybody shall join hands, and we must pressurize our governments locally. I am living in India. We are also coming out. There is a government which is much more closer to the Israel and United States. But still, we criticize our government, we criticize our foreign policy. That's how we follow a democracy, and our government listen to us. We make them understand, we make them to listen. Anyhow, I will request through this conference, and you, the gentlemen and women, please do something practical, something respectable. Pay the respect to the humanity. Even if you don't want to respect Islam, hardly matters. Don't respect Islam, but at least respect the human beings. Respect the people who breathe. Respect the people who contribute to something to this world. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Taslim. I mean, powerful words from both you and Dr. Balawi, who seems to have gone. We have a few minutes left. We're going to move at past to our Jewish traditions on the devil, which was this section. We've run into that, which is fine. But let's have 10 minutes of discussion on following our two very important contributions here. Who would like to either make a point or ask a question of our Islamic colleagues before we move on? Yes, James, would you like to go next, please?
Impressed with our Indian commentator. I think he's right on the question of religion. It's again, I would say it's been a very useful force to bring people together, to make them behave properly. But what we seem to miss is who was orchestrating this. I believe that there was a force in the Middle East, probably, to engineer this kind of marvelous movement to make everybody behave properly, whilst the people orchestrating it don't. And the evidence for that is in the Talmud. I'm sorry to have to mention it, but that document is full of the reasons for the world's state at the moment. It says that a certain race of people or community are chosen by God. We've all fallen for it, but it's a creation. It's a myth. It's a trick, actually. And it says that because we're chosen by God, we can fool people, we can deceive people, we can kill people, we can make war, as long as our God approves of it. That has been the fundamental problem that the world has faced in the last few thousand years.
Well, I think, James, that's very important. And we're coming to, in a few minutes, we'll look at the Jewish traditions on this. So your comments then will be very helpful. And you're also going to be talking to us later after lunch. So
I'll address it in more detail then.
Thank you. Hanan Aruri, would you like to make a point at this point? Yeah, welcome.
Yes.
Greetings.
First of all, thank you so much for the very thorough philosophical interpretation of what is going on. And this is very useful at this stage of our history, because we are going through a very important transform of the human race, transformation process. And this transformation process would definitely lead to a big conflict between two powers in the world. The power that wants to dominate, eliminate, and control, and the power that wants to fight against this, because we believe in humanity. I was looking at the history of the civilizations, all civilizations. When I look at the very important big civilizations in history, and I saw how they disappeared, how they vanished, how they destroyed, because I think this is a cycle we are going through as a human race. We come to the peak of power, and this power, the more we consolidate power in the hand of minority, of a small group, whoever this small group is, they will become definitely brutal. They will become definitely evil, and they want to control more, and the greed becomes so big that they want even to destroy. In the end, they will end up destroying themselves, because this cannot be sustained. This will never, in human history, if we read the history, this never have been sustained, that there was always a power, fighting power, resistance power against it. In Palestine, where I come from, this is the constellation, this is the arena of the fight between the good and the bad, between this empire of supremacy, white supremacy empire, regardless who's behind this. There are also Muslims in this power. I mean, this Zionism is about a sect. It's about a minority of these who accumulated so much wealth that they don't see the others. Palestine is the arena today where these two big powers are fighting. I don't know if it comes from religious background or it's just the destiny of things. But I believe there is something bigger than what we think it is. It's not by coincidence God has chosen this part of the world to be the place where these two, the fight will take on. And it's not by coincidence that today people in Palestine, in Gaza, these people who are powerless, literally powerless. Gaza had been sieged for 20 years. Nothing could enter to Gaza. And from there, the powerless fight, resistance has already changed the world. We are going through transformation. This transformation will be cost. There will be a big cost. We have paid a huge cost, and we are still paying this part of the world, the East. We are going to pay even more blood, because this will lead to a change. In my personal point of view, this change will be positive. it will not be the end of the world. It will not be the end of the good. It's in the contrary. I see on the long term, we are going to a very different world, a world that will limit. We keep fighting against our evil. That's also fighting against our own evil inside, impeded inside us, to become better human race. And I feel today, from what I see in Iran, what I see from Yemen, from Lebanon, all these young people, beautiful young people with a promising future in Gaza, in West Bank, in Palestine, in Iraq, in Sudan, these people are going to shape a new history. What I advise the people in the Western world, the moral people in the Western world, is to join us, to join this battle, because this will, if it destroys, it will destroy everybody. If we gain, everybody will go into another stage of the human race. Not to ignore also this artificial intelligence and how it's going to eliminate the Western world before it eliminates the East. And this is the devil, the real devil. This is the hour of Dajjal, from my point of view. This is the Messiah that will destroy the West before it destroys the East. I will stop there, and I want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to take part in this very important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hanan. That was very important. And so, look, I think we'll thank our Muslim speakers for their contributions. It's been very important, and that's why we ran on a bit. That's important. So thank you to everyone, to Moeen and Dr. Taslim and Dr. Balawi, who's not here anymore, and Hanan, thank you for sharing from the Palestinian perspective. We agree with you, I'm sure, that our solidarity is for all of humanity, and the point of this conference is to bring that forward. And to Dr. Taslim, I would say yes. Action follows. We're doing theory, but we're also active in our own spheres as intellectuals. And I like the word of Fichte, the great German philosopher. He said, thinking is also an activity. So by getting the thinking right, we're contributing to clear action, I hope. Okay, I want to move on because we've talked a lot about Judaism and the Jewish origins of Israel and what's going on. And we have a slot here in the program that's very important to look at the history of the devil in Jewish thought. And it's fallen to me to do a summary of that. We did invite several rabbis to come. Both Moeen and I have Jewish friends we invited. Sadly, we haven't had any feedback. I know it's Pesach for them. So, and I've, asked Jewish thinkers to come, but I'm going to be the substitute rabbi at this meeting. So, and just to give you an introduction, so I was born in Montreal, in Westmount, which is a Jewish community in Canada. My parents were intellectuals. They were on the left politically. Most of their friends were Jewish, actually. And when I was growing up, people like Leonard Cohen lived down the road. This was the Jewish intellectual heartland of Canada that I was born into. And so I grew up thinking, Jews are lovely. And we moved to Brighton. Most of my close friends at school, Brighton College, were Jewish. And we were members of the Labour Party as a family. So we were we thought we were moving beyond religious distinctions. And I didn't think Jews were somehow wicked or evil. I thought they were on the good side of history. They were helping humanity progress. And then later I taught at the University of London. I was active in the World Conference on Religions and Peace. And I was very close friends with Rabbi Friedlander, who was the
Üç tane mi koyacaksın oraya?
rabbi at the synagogue
Diğerlerini nereye koyacaksın?
in Westminster. And he was with me on the board of World Conference on Religions for Peace. And also Rabbi Hugo Grin, who'd survived the Holocaust. He'd lived in the camps. And so these people were my close colleagues, and I worked with them. I also heard a talk by Professor Gellner on the devil He was a famous Jewish intellectual who's written a book on the devil in philosophy. He's one of the few philosophers to actually look at the devil, and he was one of the world's leading Jewish intellectuals. He's an important thinker. So, and when I was teaching in British schools, my students would often call me the rabbi. So I think that's my qualifications for sharing these few thoughts with you. And I'm appalled at what's happened in Israel and what and the lack of resistance and voices opposing Netanyahu's hijacking of the concept of Israel and the concept of Judaism. I want to therefore drill down into what Jewish thinkers can do to resist this, and they are. Many of my friends who are Jewish are resisting what's going on. But of course, they don't often get access to the media or to control the buttons of the weapons of war. So I just want to run through. So firstly, in using my periodic table, which I talked about earlier, some of you have heard, the Jewish ones are down here, and there's distinctions to be made within the different types of Judaism. I want to talk first about Orthodox Judaism. Now, in the Orthodox traditions of Judaism, yes, the devil is there in the Bible, plays a negative role, but also in a strange way is part of humanity's evolution. And because we fell from the Garden of Paradise, where we were all just happy all the time, it forced us to get out there and learn and do stuff and understand and become, got our minds working. And so some of the rabbis say, yes, that was actually paradoxically, the devil was our teacher as humanity. We wouldn't be here having this conversation unless we'd been kicked out of the garden. So there is a tradition in Judaism of actually saying, what is the wisdom that the devil has given to humanity? And the Orthodox tradition has many sayings and many rabbis have thought about this for centuries, literally centuries. And in the end, they came to the same idea that Plato had. If we were talking in a Jewish synagogue seminary now, they would say, yes, Plato was right. Ultimately, evil comes from ignorance. All our choices, if you look back over your life, when you go wrong, when you make a mistake and do something that causes pain to you and other people, it comes from ignorance. We make ethically wrong choices. And that's what our ancestors have been doing, tragically. That's what is symbolically shown in the Garden of Eden story and the fall of man. But actually, it's an archetypal way of talking about ignorance. And that's what Plato said is the origin of evil. There's no devil in Greek philosophy, and there isn't a devil in rabbinic philosophy. There's an ancient tradition that is reinterpreted archetypally as the devil in an archetypal sense. So Philo and other great Jewish thinkers assimilated Judaism to the highest Platonic traditions, and that's really, if you were studying Judaism in an Orthodox tradition, that's kind of what you learn. And then there's Kabbalistic Judaism. I want to talk about that. So the Kabbalah is very interesting. I've studied it and taught it, studied and learned with Kabbalists for years. They believe that there's the written Bible text, but that has to be supplemented by the oral tradition. Because obviously humanity is much, much older than writing, and those oral traditions were handed down by the rabbis and by the learned Kabbalists. And their teaching on the devil is also very, very interesting. In the Kabbalah, there's a thing called the Tree of Life, which our friend Inga just showed us a bunch of flowers. That's symbolic. The Tree of Life is all that is good and beautiful and wise. And it has 10 Sephiroth, spheres of reality that are interpenetrating. And if you study the Kabbalah, like Madonna did, you learn all this stuff, and it takes years. I'm summarizing years and years of study, right? But interestingly, the Kabbalah says there's also a tree of evil, which is the mirror inverse of the tree of life. So as we can choose goodness and we can choose wisdom and love and generosity and kindness, some of us are tempted to choose evil, which is power for ourselves, greed, the satisfaction of negative impulses. And so this is where everything becomes inverted. And one of the things that Kabbalistic Judaism says is that the inversion is caused by lies. If you believe truth is the reflection of reality, al-haq in Arabic, so lies are the reflection of the inverted reality, which is non-existence, in fact. Now, what's so interesting is that in my researches over many years, summarizing, I've come to the view that Jesus was very, very strongly influenced by the Kabbalah, which was the oral tradition that existed in Judaism. The Bible, as we know it now, wasn't fully finished. It wasn't completely written down. There wasn't a book called the Bible. Jesus was an orally trained teacher, as well as the scriptures, and his understanding of reality was very much Kabbalistically inspired, which is the mystical side of Judaism. Now, in my commentaries on the gospel, I've gone into this in huge detail. I've explained exactly. So when Christ says the rabbis of his day, who were small-minded people, criticized him for teaching too much and too deeply, and they said, no, we follow Abraham. We know what we're talking about. He said, before Abraham was, I am, which they said, oh, that's heresy, stone him. But what he was saying by that is, look, I've been taught by an oral living stream current that predates Abraham, is the eternal truth. And that's the place Kabbalistic Judaism is coming from. That's why he was doing what he was doing. And later, fast forward 600 years later, I've been able to prove in my commentary on the Quran that Muhammad was inspired by the same source. Muhammad had met rabbis, he'd met Christians, he'd been to the cave, he'd meditated deeply for 15 years as he was working with Khadijah. He'd traveled to places and met sages. And he went to the same source, the Kabbalistic source, which predates all the religious distinctions. The Kabbalah teaches that it's the oral lineage that is the source of all this wisdom. And so in the Quran, in my commentary on the Quran, I've explained how and the signs are that Muhammad knew all this, what I'm talking about. If he was sitting on this call, he'd say, yes, Thomas, that's right. So the devil is therefore something that we have to understand. We defeat it by knowledge. That would be what Jesus would have said. It's what Moses would have said. It's what that Kabbalistic tradition says. That's the essence of the Kabbalistic view of the devil. Because the devil stands for broken off, partial knowledge being misused. The only way to defeat that is to integrate and get to synthesis. And by the way, the word synagogue is the place where everything is led together. Synthesis and synagogue come from the same etymology. Synagogue is when you're leading to the place of togetherness. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is the devil in Reformed Judaism. Now, Reformed Judaism is very interesting. I've worked with rabbis from that tradition. Rabbi Friedlander, who was the Dean of Studies at the Leo Baeck College in London, where they train Reformed rabbis. And Leo Baeck was a student of philosophy. He was the head of the Jewish community in Berlin at the time of the Holocaust. He was put in a concentration camp. And what he did was teach philosophy. He survived in the camps by teaching Plato. And my friend Rabbi Friedlander was his direct pupil. He wrote a biography of him. And, that's what the Reformed tradition is about. It's about education. What they say is, look, the biblical literalists haven't got a clue what they're talking about. You can't read the Bible like a literal storybook. You have to interpret it philosophically and realize that it was written 1,000 years before Christ. It has oral traditions in it that were Babylonian and Sumerian. The whole Noah's flood story comes from Sumeria. It was Utnapishtim who builds the ark. It's all there in texts that were discovered in Iraq by British archaeologists. We discovered the origin of a lot of the Bible stories in Genesis. They're not Jewish at all. These are ancient, universal Mesopotamian teaching stories. Some of them also came from Egypt. So Reform Judaism embraces knowledge and study, like I'm talking about, and says to be a learned Jew, you have to know all this stuff. You have to realize, because it teaches humility. You know, the Jewish Bible is an amalgam of many, many stories from many cultures, and it doesn't own the truth. It is one receptacle into which all these truths are poured. The Jewish calendar comes from Babylonian sources. The Akkadian language they spoke in Babylon was an East Semitic language. Hebrew is a West Semitic language. The Aramaic speakers were West Semitic. You know, so in Reform Judaism, the insistence is on learning and education and philosophy. And the synagogue has been called the place of study, prayer, hyphenated. If you go into a synagogue anywhere in the world, you will find a library, like a whole bunch of books, commentaries, texts, not just one Bible like you get in a Christian church. You get Maimonides, you get commentaries on the Bible, because the synagogue is a place of study as well as prayer. And that's the Reformed tradition. Now I want to talk about Enochian Judaism, which is little known and maybe new to some of you, but is incredibly important. There was a Scottish traveller who went to Ethiopia in the 1700s. He befriended the Ethiopian kings, and they gave him a precious book called the Book of Enoch, which they'd kept in their Bible. We'd lost it. And the Book of Enoch is an incredibly important text, which scholars are still really understanding its importance now. And it tells the backstory of what happened in the Garden of Eden. If you haven't read the Book of Enoch, you know, do. I've written a commentary on it, which is on my Green University website. And it tells the story of how Enoch, who was a sage or prophet in the antediluvian times, so before Noah, he's the great-great-grandfather of Noah, is taken to heaven by an angel in a vision. It's like an out-of-body experience, we would now say. And he's shown the heaven worlds, but on the way, he passes a place of torment and grief and a whole bunch of devils. And they're all shouting out to him, Enoch, Enoch, rescue us, help, help. And he says, well, what have you done? And their leader was someone called Shem-Jazza. And we hear his narrative in the Book of Enoch. Shem-Jazza led a rebellious angelic breakaway faction onto planet Earth in immemorial time. We don't know the time. And they corrupt humanity. Humanity was created good by the good God. And yet Shem-Jazza and his rebel angels corrupted us. They taught us war. They taught us all kinds of dark arts, how to make weapons, how to make metals. And for that, they're now being punished. And Enoch sees all this and reports it when he comes back to Earth after his trip to heaven. Now, this story, it's called 1 Enoch, is really, really important for an understanding of the Enochian understanding of the devil. The devil is actually Shem-Jazza. And there are people who now are saying, well, this must be relating to a race of intelligent, what we would call extraplanetary beings. It was very interesting. Moeen was saying that in their tradition, the devil is a jinn, not an angel, he's a jinn, and that they predated humanity. The jinn were around on this planet before we humans were brought into being. Well, that sort of fits with the Enochian story, except that in the Enochian story, the devil, Shem-Jazza, comes when humanity's here to corrupt us. So maybe there have been several demonic attacks on this planet, and the Book of Enoch tells one. I suspend judgment. And by the way, it's interesting that in Islam, Enoch is an honored sage. He's called Idris in the Quran, and in my commentary on the Quran, I've gone into that in great detail. The Muslims honor Enoch, and they know this book. They're learned, imams do. So now what's so important is that we know that the Enochian scriptures influenced Jesus and other people around at that time within Judaism. And we know this because in the Essene community of Qumran, scriptures have been found, not just the biblical ones, but the Book of Enoch is there in fragments that they've discovered in the Essene community at Qumran. They were studying the Book of Enoch. And if you read the New Testament very carefully, as I've done in my commentaries, you'll find references to the Book of Enoch. So Jesus and his disciples knew this book. It was like their text, because in the Book of Enoch, he refers to him, he meets an angelic being in the highest heaven who is called the Son of Man. Brilliant, white, dazzling figure. Enoch sees him and is totally overawed. And the Son of Man promises he will come to earth and redeem mankind from the devil's grip. He's going to undo all the evil. So fast forward, here's Jesus, young man, brilliant, precocious student, reading the Book of Enoch. He says, oh, look, the Son of Man's going to save humanity. Anyone volunteering? Oh, I'll volunteer, he says. So you can actually see in the Book of Enoch, Jesus getting his marching orders to defeating the devil. And almost word for word in the Book of Enoch, you find stuff that Jesus is later saying. When people say, are you the Son of God? He says, no, I'm just the Son of Man. Don't, you know. So that's all really interesting to what was going on there. And the Essenes believe, they also influenced John the Baptist, or Yahya, as our Muslim brothers call him. And, you know, the whole outlook of that was about purity is the way to defeat the devil. So the Essenes had a kind of like a proto-Cistercian community going, where they would live lives of righteousness. That's how you defeat the devil, purity and righteousness. And that was actually esoteric Judaism, which we can call Enochian Judaism. So now what's happened? Well, those traditions have all continued running. I've met Jews who come from all those traditions, and they're still bubbling away. There's another tradition I want to mention, which is important, which is what I call feminist Judaism. I've met people both, you know, all around, who are proud women who want to reclaim women's spirituality and yet remain Jewish. And they look back at the biblical text and they say, well, these were proud women, these. They want to rewrite the story of Eve. Eve wasn't a devil worshipper. She was someone courageous enough to take on the burden of knowledge. She was the initiator of Adam. And often women are incredible creatures, very powerful, very learned. I've met a few in my life who've been my teachers, and we should honor them. I have 3 daughters, you know, they're amazing. And so that's what feminist Judaism is about. It's reclaiming woman's power. Women didn't bring the fall of man. They're trying to educate and bring life back to the desert. And so in a sense, this tradition in Judaism is like the hippie movement among the Jewish community, both in the diaspora and in Israel. And one of the tragedies of the October 7th attack by Hamas was it struck a knife at the heart of the most friendly to the Palestinian cause of all the Jewish communities, was that feminist Jewish community that was out there having their rave dance. Now, I've got questions about whether Netanyahu actually kind of had pre-warning of this attack. And my friends in Israel still want an inquiry. We don't trust Netanyahu's account. Oh, the horrible Hamas people came and attacked us, so we're going to destroy Gaza. No, I think, you know, my friends who are from this more feminist tradition would say, no, this was pre-planned. They deliberately attacked us. They left the gates open. They stood down the troops so that nobody was manning the fence. I mean, that's the most policed place in the whole world, that fence. How come they suddenly get through? No, so there's got to be an inquiry to clean this up within the Israeli community, within the Jewish community. We don't accept that view that now horrible Hamas did this. We're God's avenging angels, so we're going to destroy all of Gaza. It just looks too suspicious to my mind and to the friends I've got who are telling me on the ground. And that leads me to the next point. So, okay, what about Zionist Judaism? Where did that come from? That's a whole new thing. Herzl, who kind of founded it, was not actually a Jewish believer. He didn't believe in anything of what I've talked about. He didn't understand anything about the Kabbalah or the wisdom of the rabbis. He had no respect for them. He was a European-trained Viennese intellectual who just wanted a kind of a sort of homeland for people that he thought were homeless. Actually, they weren't. They were very happy being integrated into European and Middle Eastern society. The Jews had depended on the Ottomans' generosity for centuries. They had lived in the Ottoman community in Safat, the great Kabbalists like Isaac Luria. They were welcomed by the Ottomans. They were brothers together on the same quest. But Herzl knew nothing about this. And so he thought, well, let's create a new homeland. Let's put it in Palestine, which struck a body blow to all the good-natured conversations that have been going on for centuries. And I've been reading recently a biography of Wittgenstein, who came from a assimilated family in Vienna, well, in Linz, Vienna. And one of the big influences on Wittgenstein was a man called Krauss, who was an intellectual, Jewish intellectual in Vienna. He wrote criticizing Herzl. He wrote a satire about him called The Crown of Zion. He said, Herzl is mad. You know, we're going to lose everything in the Middle East and Europe if he pursues this Zionist fantasy, because it'll create animosity between the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews in the Middle East and in Europe. You know, we don't want this Herzl nonsense. Give him a little crown, stick him in a little camp somewhere he can be happy, and put him on an island. You know, it was a satire. But unfortunately, it was a satire that caught on. And I think it was to do with the sort of racial thinking of the time, this idea of racial purity, so the Jews have to have a homeland. No, you know, that was just foolish thinking, and it was coming from the same sources as Nazi racism, this idea of one home, one people. That's not how history works. We've always been multicultural, you know, multi-faith, living and communicating, and as our speaker from Palestine said, living in communion across different, you know, boundaries. So Zionist Judaism was I don't know, is it a sort of extremist death cult based on hysterical thanatos, as Freud would say? Because Freud didn't like Zionism either. He said it's a ridiculous idea. Obviously, he didn't like Nazism. He had to flee to London. But, you know, it's like they're twin images, the Zionist and the Nazi thing. And interestingly, the private secretary of Bertrand Russell, a man called Schumann, wrote a book about the dark side of Zionism. We know now that there were Zionist leaders doing deals with the Nazis to cream off the most intellectual and accomplished Jews to go and settle in Palestine. They actually paid money per head to get the most learned Jews to escape from Nazi Germany. And the Nazis were happy. Yeah, we'll give you the top 1% so they can go to Israel, pay us, you know, 1,000 whatever dollars a head. And they did. And so there was a secret deal going on. And Schumann, who was utterly appalled when he discovered this. But it's true. And also the early Zionist movement made a great fuss about Mussolini. They copied their waving the flag thing and doing, you know, marching up and down in shorts on Mussolini's fascist movement in Italy. And we know this from factual evidence. The Nazis and the fascists welcomed visiting early Zionists to come to visit Italy and Germany. And they said, well, we love what you're doing in Germany and Italy. Yeah, one home for one people. We agree 100%. We want it in Israel for us. Now, you know, this has been scrubbed from the history of Zionism, but these are facts that we, as a scholarly enterprise, should study. And anyone that opposes them, this cult, this death cult of Zionism, gets killed off. Rabin is an example, assassinated. The Kennedy brothers, JFK, who was preventing them getting nuclear weapons, assassinated. Robert Kennedy, assassinated. You know, the death count goes on, right up to Charlie Kirk, who seemed to be questioning the story on Gaza, assassinated. So, you know, this is disturbing, folks, and we have the duty to understand. And what you have to realize is Zionism is not a religious tradition. It has no understanding of theology. It would be on what our friend Moeen said is the disbelievers, the kufr. It would say it's in a sense declared war on God. And the authentic, real Jews are saying we don't accept Zionism because it's trying to do what only God can do. Only God built the promised land and only God can restore it. Well, Zionism is saying, no, to hell with that. We're going to do it through our muscle power and our bombs and our guns and our tanks. Now, that's a heresy in Jewish terms and in all other terms. There's also another tradition of skeptical Judaism, which is not the same as heretical Judaism. Skeptical Judaism is intellectuals like Freud who tried to trace the history of Judaism. He wrote a very important book about going back to Akhenaten, which our friend from Norway mentioned. Now, Freud actually reckons that the chances are that the Jewish community Freud led out of Egypt actually turned on him and killed him. You might think, what? I didn't know that. Well, it's possible. And psychologically, what Freud said is that human nature is so weird that when you see somebody brilliant, successful, interesting, you kind of want to emulate them. And if they won't let you do that, then you want to kill them. There's a sort of rivalry between students and teachers. I've experienced this. I've had death threats from my students. It comes with the job. And it turns out that's what may have happened to Moses. And so that's why there's this huge guilt thing. That's what Freud said in Judaism. And then I argue as a psycho-eschatologist that this is why the Jews want to now defeat Iran, because they know they borrowed so many things from Iran. Israel would never have had its second temple built without Iran. The whole eschatology, the whole concept of the devil went back to Zoroastrianism, where Zoroaster, 1700 BC, put this eschatology on the map. Now, the Jews deep down know this, maybe only unconsciously, which is why they have to kill their teacher. Iran is an ancient civilization that was ancient long before Moses, long before Abraham. But the Jews are turning on him like they turned on Moses. That's a hypothesis, psychological hypothesis. Marx was another skeptical Jewish guy who I've proved, I think, that he was very inspired by the Kabbalah. His idea of tikkun, healing the proletariat, was a Kabbalistic idea. You bring redemption by setting free the most downtrodden. And he was trying to find a collective tikkun to redeem not just even the Jewish people, but all people. So communism was the name he gave to that. It was a force for good initially, but then it became corrupted. So, that's a potted history. And for him, it was evil and ignorance and capitalism and greed that is the devil, effectively. He had no time for Zionism. I mean, it just didn't occur to him. That's a nonsense idea. And it is for all Marxists. So my last point is we have to turn to real Judaism. All I can say is real Judaism has to stand up and reclaim this title, take it from the hands of this death cult, which is Zionism, led by Netanyahu and the Christian Zionists that are so crazy and ill-educated that they go along with this idea that killing is what God wants. Moses said, "Thou shalt not kill." It's as simple as that. So we have to stand up, the real inheritors of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Solomon, David, Isaiah, and all the great sages of the rabbinical and Kabbalistic traditions, and oppose this fake Zionism that is pretending, like Dajjal, it's based on lies and deceit and saying, well, we're Jewish, we're Israel. No, you're not. You're fake. You're Dajjal. And so that can only be done by the real Jewish people. And I'm friends with them. I know that they know this. And that's why I wanted to bring this to your attention. With them, true Muslims and true Christians can work to reclaim peace for the Middle East, stop the bombings, have two states living in peace and harmony, and we could reopen the Golden Gate at that point. But we've got some work to do first. And the only tools we can use to do this are education and righteousness. Yeah, so that's my instead of a rabbi, I've given you an understanding, I hope, of how real Jewish thinking would see the devil and our duties. Okay, Moeen, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll moderate since you spoke. Well, thank you very much, Thomas. I like that opening remark, substitute rabbi. Your last point is very important, actually. The hijacking of if you want to call it Orthodox Judaism, by two forces, the secular Zionists, Dajjalic Zionists, and the Christian Zionists, which Simon will be discussing in the afternoon. But let me raise a question and open up to other people. People can think about their questions. Is that you mentioned the solution? That's good. Diagnosis is important. Very deep diagnosis that we're doing here that is not goes beyond the current affairs and geopolitics. Bringing true Jews, true Christians, true Muslims together. Indeed, that's what the Muslim eschatology is all about. That the Imam Mahdi, the rightly guided Imam, the Dajjal, confrontation with the Dajjal, and the second coming of Jesus. That's what's going to happen. But we're going through a dark transition. Unfortunately, as Simon said, it's not that I preach war, but like Hegseth, but it's not that I preach war, but we're dealing with a deadly, to use a modern terminology, military, industrial, security, intelligence apparatus. Is global.
Sure.
Is Dajjalic, is pharaonic, is techno-feudalism.
Sure.
But when that is overthrown, and it will be overthrown, and that's why eschatology is important. Why? There is actually good news, hope. Humans want hope, and I agree with Hanan. This is not the people define eschatology as the end of the world. Yes, there is an end stage. Mountains collapse, seas evaporate, day of judgment, but we're not there. This phase of eschatology is important. It is frightening. It is deadly. It's going to envelope every country, every city in the world. But the good news is there is a golden era coming. And that era in the Holy Land will be the triumph of Judaism, authentic Judaism taught by Moses, taught by Jesus, taught by Mohammad. That's going to come together. However, this is a question. If education, and I would qualify that, if mass education, we've got billions of people, is the key, is a weapon, if you want to call it, we are way behind, all of us here. We got to get, for instance, no offense to you, even getting a Jewish rabbi has been a problem. Come on. Even a Muslim imam, although we had two other Muslim speakers there, it's not that we haven't tried, or Christians, we're up against, I wouldn't say a brick wall, but even getting people to listen to what we're saying, other than, marching up and down a street, protests or whatever, we're having a challenge. What's your view on that, Thomas? Why is it difficult, even getting imams, ministers, and rabbis together, never mind about their followers? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so thank you for that. I think that I just want to go back to what you were saying earlier about what we're up against. Let's know what we're up against, because we are up against this, I think you said, the military, industrial, intelligence, security apparatus, right?
Yes.
It's vast. It has vast resources. And it's pumped people's minds full of fear and hate and You know, I know people in Britain that are afraid to go out of their house because they're so terrified of everyone. I mean, it's shocking, and this is all coming at us all the time. That's why we don't have, you know, thousands. If we were running some kind of like casino karaoke sing-along thing, we'd have thousands of people come to our meetings. No, because we're doing deep educational work. People have lost the habit of that. People can hardly read books anymore because they watch little TikToks instead. You know, I have students that grumble, say, I can't read a gospel, sir. You know, like what, 30 pages? No, I don't, you know, let alone a Quran or a collected works of Plato. So we're up against a sort of socialization into ignorance. I call it Sophiaphobia. Actually, people are afraid of wisdom now.
Why? Let me ask you, why? Throw the question.
Well, because it brings responsibility. Those that know, and the Quran is brilliant on this, there are certain people that know, and the Quran keeps saying, you'll understand what I mean if you're one of the people that know. If you're a person that knows, it brings responsibility. You have to care, you have to protect, you have to heal, you have to love. And people have lost that habit. It's like the muscle of compassion, the muscle of intelligent thinking has gone. So our job is quite important, actually, what we're trying to do. You know,
but let me put you on a spot. What about the universities? Right, they're people in cocoon positions, especially globally. I mean, again, you know, where are they?
Well, thank you. Yes, the problem with what's happened in the universities, and Nietzsche complained about this a while ago, he grumbled at the scholars and said, you've all become specialists. None of you are concerned with the bigger picture. Nobody thinks outside the box. If you do that, you lose your tenure, you lose your job. The problem with academia is they become like frightened rabbits. You know, I mean, I've invited various learned professors I know to come and, oh, no, I can't talk about the devil. It's outside my remit. I don't know anything about that. You know, so we're up against, so the job we have to do is the joined up thinking. That has to become standard. When I taught at the Muslim college, I loved it because the modern university grew out of Islam. Because in Islamic madrasas and colleges, everything was done under the divine wisdom. And so you were expected to know everything. This is why people like Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd were polymaths. They knew about geology and astronomy and chemistry and alchemy and history and geology and the whole thing, because all knowledge comes from God, the divine intelligence. I don't think our universities will be saved until we get more philosophy departments and theology departments doing the kind of work we're doing on this call. You know, I taught at the University of Oxford, and I was happy there because they still have some knowledge of that there. But the so-called University of Balawi, where they teach, you know, how to make hairdressing, I'm afraid we need to get them back up to scratch.
But there's another issue. It's the content. It's not just what you say about people being frightened for various reasons in universities or religious scholars or the public. Is it because war, you know, people are scared, frightened about the uncertainty, the volatility, insecurity of, you know, we're talking about real war, moving towards World War III. Why aren't other people, you know, being more active other than, you know, marching up and down a street?
Sure. Well, I think they are. I mean, I'm in touch with loads of people around Britain and Europe and the world who are coming out now and saying we deserve wisdom. Our species is called Homo sapiens.
Yes.
Sapiens is wisdom. So the antidote to Sophiaphobia, the terror of wisdom, is to actually claim real wisdom. And that's what Kant said. Dare to be wise. That was his slogan. I'm a Kantian. So we are going to get there. Simon, do you have a comment? And then we'll go to Hanan. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, well, I mean, I love the debate we're having latterly on this, particularly around universities, which is something that has concerned me over a long period of time. But interestingly, Thomas and Maureen, as you were talking about reason, we had the Age of Reason, didn't we, 1700s? And Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Kant. I mean, he was very keen to keep faith in God, which he was in favor of people having, but he very much didn't see it as part of reason. It was faith. That was the area of faith, whereas reason is talking about things that we can actually reason using our a priori faculties. And whereas faith is simply faith. And so when you have his categorical imperative and all of the universal maxims that he thought would create world peace, if you like, amongst other things, all of that came out of reasoning without including the mystical or the imaginative or the sentimental or the emotional. So I think in that regard, I'm slightly more of a Hegelian because he included all of the full range of our consciousness, including the mystical as well as the rational.
And I'm looking forward to your talk about this. You're going to be talking about it's going to be brilliant. I just would, can I just say one thing about in response to that? I think Kant is underestimated. He was from a piety background, the pious tradition
yes,
of German Lutheranism, sort of put faith aside. You had that, and then you got on with stuff. I think, but Kant was he would love this world, this age, where we can bring reason and faith back into correspondence. And he would love my periodic table were he around. Because what I've tried to do with this is to make it possible to apply the critical rigor of Kantian type thought and logic to spirituality and faith. As you know, I think we're now at that point because we now know a lot more about different religions than Kant did in his day. And so I think that's, and I think we will get to Kant's vision of peace. And in fact, I'm planning a peace conference in Kaliningrad and Frombork, Poland, Russia border to have a peace dialogue among philosophers in Europe. And we'll go to where Kant taught and where Copernicus taught, which was Frombork. Hanan, you've been very patient. Do come in at this point, and then we're going to break for lunch. Yeah.
Yes. I think I need much more time to rethink many of the facts you have, many of the things you have been expressing here. But I have few questions or a few issues to raise. First of all, going back to Zionism and its roots, I don't think Zionism is started or looking for a Jewish state, let's say, let's put it that way, started from Herzl. This has I can track roots of this movement going back even to 18th century and 17th century. Going along with in fact, the Jewish community in Europe gaining, again, more financial power, more economic power, and becoming elite. So the Jews of Europe, for many reasons, I have no time to talk about them or to even to discuss them, they become the elite of the European society. Given this privilege, have taken the Jewish community into, I would say, between brackets. On one hand, they had fears because when you become so rich and you have power, there will be people who will be opposing this power, increasing power. On the other hand, they also had theological ideas. It's definitely, even if they have expressed, even if Herzl himself was a secular Zionist, but the whole narrative of creating the state for the Jewish people in Palestine came from theological background. So even if he sounds, between brackets, secular, the whole narrative came from the Bible, the Old Testament. That's one. The second thing, the Jews as a community, they had been always excluding themselves from the others. They had this superior, the leaders, I would say, not the normal Jewish person. They had this idea of being chosen people. They had very impeded in the culture, not necessarily to practice it a religious sense, but even the secular ones. What I had spoken to so many of them, even Israelis, I had the opportunity in few times when I had the chance to talk to Israelis, even the left-wing people who would accept to live in two-state solution at that time, which doesn't exist anymore, they always had this colonial, superior, impeded behavior and concept. So it's very hard for me to differentiate between the Judaism, the Jewish people, and the Zionism and the colonial state of Israel. These are four layers of Jewish community. I would say again, I would not say all of them, but there is also a small minority of the Jews who are opposing, but they are still a small minority, even in the world. They are still a small minority who did not come out, spoken aloud enough to say there is difference between Judaism, Zionism, and the Jewish supremacist elite who wants to rule the world. Is it by coincidence that today the richest people in the world most of them are Jewish people? Those who own this high-tech AI technology, what happened? That all of them, they are, or at least 80% of them are Jewish, and they are so committed to the state of Israel and the creation of the state of Israel. Even using their secular narrative, they use it, employ it to control the Middle East. So there is very unclear boundaries between Judaism today and the colonial project in the Middle East and Zionism. This is one thing. The second thing, when we talk about religion and philosophy, education without values, it has no meaning. And for me, the philosophy comes from a very deep human sense of good and bad and values. Today, what we are witnessing today, before education, we need to rethink our value system. If you tell me today, the best solution is to have two-state solutions for Palestinians and the Israelis to live together, yeah, maybe it's suffice, but let's go back even deeper. The indigenous of the land, there's the real value of respecting these people who have been living on this land for generations, and those European colonials, regardless what is their faith, regardless what is their philosophy or their religious background, these are colonials, these are invaders, these are the ones who took the land by force, these are the ones who committed genocide. They are the ones who practice ethnic cleansing, not only against Palestinians, but the whole region. So how I would accept from value point of view, not from political point of view, that allow this model of a state to exist? The model of the state, a state that use violent means to control and to reinforce its right to exist, using such a violent, irrelevant force and power, employing financial, political, media power to reinforce its existence. I'm sorry, as Palestinian, I don't care about the geography, the land, more than I care about the value system behind the creation of the state. I don't accept it, not because I don't want to share the piece of land. For me, from my philosophical point of view, from my value point of view, I don't believe in boundaries between human beings and the race. Everybody can live wherever they feel comfortable and where they can flourish. But if you want to create a state on such a baseless right and give it a place and right to exist, this is where I have a problem with the whole idea. Being even Muslim or Christian or Jewish, or I don't care, or secular. So that's what I'm opposing today. That's why the model of Israel is the most dangerous model today, presented to human future, threatens the human race. Not only because they are taking Palestine, but those who are behind this state and who are supporting this model of a state are the supremacist, elite, violent, radical, we call it what they are, Jewish, threats, elite. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that because I'm anti-Jewish at all. I mean, in my ancestors, I'm sure at certain point in history, I was a Jew. That's not the case. I'm not Jewish against Judaism as religion because I know this interaction between Judaism, Islam, and the Christianity all over, even before, even from the Babylon time and from the Egyptian time. And these are human experiences and values have been going from one traveling with generations and with civilizations. but I'm against the model that they are trying today to put in place that wants to rule everybody who is not in line with this form of life they want to impose on us, or this form of power they want to impose on us. Unfortunately, most of them are Jews. Well, how do you explain this? How do we explain this in history today? How they come, the Jewish elite are the ones who are leading the world to destruction.
Thank you so much for your questions and contribution and your passion and your will to truth. We're with you here. Just a few thoughts in response before we come to our lunch break. So I've agonized over this myself, and I want to share one insight. Because yes, how was it possible that this small group of people we called the Israelis, now Judah became the dominant tribe, so they became known as Jews, but they're actually from all the tribes, became so dominant in world history and culture? And I think I've identified the cause is the invention of the alphabet took place in the exact region of Palestine, Judea, and Lebanon. That was the epicenter of this huge knowledge explosion. And before that, the morals, ethics, values, and knowledge systems were taught using very complicated either cuneiforms in Mesopotamia or hieroglyphs in Egypt. It took decades to learn, to master it. And mostly it was done orally, right? With the alphabet, there was this sense that, well, now we know everything. We can master and control everything. And once the Bible got written as an alphabetic text, it gave people the illusion of knowing everything. We're the people with the book. It says so here. We're the chosen people in the book, which we wrote, our ancestors wrote. So it becomes a self-referential chosen vehicle for chosenness and specialness, which then elevates the people that have that to this colonial sense that we can then, dominate other people because we're so clever. Now, fast forward to the 20th century, the same people who benefited from that have invented AI, Facebook, the high tech that controls and dominates us. It's just the alphabetic elite. They've been doing this since 1700 BC when the alphabet was invented. And that's why the stories that got written down in the first book were all about their tribe. If I always say to my students, if the alphabet had been invented on Orkney at the same time, 1700, we'd all be reading a holy book that tells about the story of how Makram and his sons became important and fought the people on the other islands, and God was on their side and all that. So that's the first response to you, is it's an accident of history and the alphabetization of humanity. We haven't recovered from that shock. The Quran came along saying, no, we're the real book. We're the special people. We have our book. The Christians said, no, we have our book, and waved their gospels. So we're in this era of alphabetic wars, each of which claims to be the book. What I'm saying is, let's step back from this, guys. Let's de-escalate. Let's actually become multi-literate. Let's all learn Arabic, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, Phoenician. Let's do scholarship. We'll see we're all from the same people, which goes back to your point about the indigenous people. We're all indigenous. I'm from the Druid community. I'm indigenous to the British Isles. We are an oral culture that predate all these books. Stonehenge goes back to 5000 BC, long before this alphabet started. So what we have to do is remember the deep, distant past. When I met the Sufi elder in Galilee, in Palestine, he thought I was an MI6 agent and hated me. And until he discovered I was an arch druid. And I explained what it meant, and he became my blood brother for life. We're best friends. He wouldn't let go of my hand. It was all filmed, this encounter. So from the Druid wisdom ancient perspective, you're absolutely right. And I would say that the colonial attitude you're getting with the Israeli Zionists now, which is disgusting and disgraceful, spitting on people, torching their homes, doing genocide in Gaza, is similar to what the American colonialists did in the New World against the indigenous people of there. And they're treatment of the Native Americans was shocking, and the same in Africa and other parts of the world. We have to unthink that whole idea that I'm special, I've got special rights over you because I've got this holy alphabet text that tells me I can do what I want to you. We have to unthink all that and go back to that shared indigenous wisdom. That's why all these American middle-class kids are all going down to Peru to take ayahuasca, because it catapults them back into that primal consciousness moment. And that's a good thing. You know, we all need to get back to that place of enlightenment, as it were. From there, we can rebuild a proper peace that's worth living in. And I'm deeply ashamed, actually, of what's been going on in history, and is still going. You know, the Hegseth types they're just fueled up by the wrong text. So look, anyway, that's a bit of an apology and explanation. There's a lot of work to be done here, but you know, let's do it. I think
So that's a good time to close, isn't it? To have a break.
I think we should have our lunch break. We're half an hour late. We've got half an hour for lunch, and then we're going to come back in half an hour, 2 o'clock French time, and we're going to hear from our next speakers, which will be very important, because we're talking about the Epstein files and the feminist angle on all this. We have various speakers joining us. So there is a gender side to all this, Hanan, as you know. But look, thank you all for coming to this opening session. It's been interesting, I would say. And I'm going to keep the thing running. I'm not going to shut this down. So you just leave and exit your screen, go off and I'm going to have a pot of soup, which I've pre-cooked. And then we'll see you back in half an hour for the next important topic, okay? So bless you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Okay, right, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So I'm going to switch the video off. That's the best way to do this.
Yeah,
But how could you get that open? I couldn't.
just
see.
here. Just you can
Well,
hear
I
that
mean-
CEO sound just and just click.
I was I supposed to click in the middle first?
No, here.
Well, I was clicking there, right, and couldn't get rid of the red light. So I'm last on the pecking order, so I'm going to stay up and finish it, which will be late.
That's okay. That's okay. That's
It's
your
9:30 now. But like,
yeah. That's your important meeting. You know,
yes, I'll probably come back in, I'd say, a quarter of an hour. And allowing for 2 hours. Say they restart at 10, it'll be midnight. And so then, what can you get the bed ready for me? And I'll just not bother anyone and just undress myself and get into bed. It's midnight.
Yeah.
Or
otherwise, I'll give the handover that to the night staff.
But
I'll give them to the handover in the night staff.
Oh, right.
Yeah, when you press the button and somebody coming to helping you.
Okay, so that'll be midnight, roughly. Okay, thanks. So,
that meantime, you want to change this one or not?
But
You want to change your clothes? Or
no, because I'd look odd if I go back on there in my night clothes. I'll be embarrassed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is the sound too loud coming through? Is it bothering everyone?
No.
Good, because they rise and fall.
That's okay. At the time, is the break time.
But
Your break time?
they are a breakdown.
How long it will be break?
I don't know. He didn't say, but I expect no more than
half an hour.
Probably less. That's why I said I'd come back in about a quarter of an hour. I'll just get something to eat. I've got plenty of stuff in the fridge.
Yeah, you can eat. Yeah.
And
no worries.
And I wish this room had better lighting.
Huh?
I wish this room had better lighting.